Chapter 1, The Dragonborn Child. Chapter 1, The Dragonborn Child. The vast grasslands stretched as far as the eye could see, with tall wild grass concealing lurking beasts beneath. Strong and powerful front paws crouched low, with muscles arching on the back, poised to spring forward toward the prey. Not far away, a group of herbivorous giant antelopes were scattered, grazing freely. These antelopes were large, robust, and plump. With long spiral-patterned horns, they were the most populous herbivores on this grassland. When these antelopes fed, they would encircle the weak young in the group, with the mother antelopes spreading out around them to graze. The strongest rams in the herd would be positioned on the periphery, grazing while occasionally lifting their heads to chew and look around, unaware of the impending danger. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew, causing the wild grass to ripple like water, revealing the beast. The vigilant male giant antelope snorted, stamped its hooves, and began to run, triggering the herd to scatter and flee instantly. The grayish-yellow beast let out a low growl, its powerful hind legs pushing off as it sprang from the grass, pouncing ferociously toward the prey. Generally, predators prefer to hunt the old, the young, the weak, or the sick in a herd, as they run slower and are easier to catch. The resistance offered by these is less than that from the strong members of the herd, reducing the risk of the predator getting injured. In the wild, injury could mean the possibility of death. However, this grayish-yellow beast focused on the strongest and plumpest giant antelope in the group. Its body, spanning 7 meters, indicated it was beginning to surpass the limits of its species, entering the ranks of ferocious beasts. In its eyes was not only the wildness of a beast and the cruelty of a predator, but also the glimmer of wisdom. With a powerful body and strength, an animal's instinct, and gradually burgeoning intelligence, it had become the most powerful predator in this area, the fierce saber lion. The fierce saber lion locked its gaze on the giant antelope running ahead, which stood 2 meters at the shoulders. Its sharp horns were straight, with long and sturdy legs running like the wind. This was one of the fastest running animals on the grassland, yet, in front of the fierce saber lion, which to humans would be considered a behemoth, the giant antelope was merely a plaything fleeing for its life. The giant antelope zigzagged ahead but could never shake off the predator trailing behind. The rapid running caused the giant antelope to start losing stamina, while the beast remained at ease, the distance between them shortening. Several times, the fierce saber lion's claws almost toppled the giant antelope, but merely grazed its rump, leaving dozens of deep claw marks. This was the predator's sinister pleasure, a powerful being toying with the weaker. Finally, the strong giant antelope's forelegs gave way, collapsing to the ground, its momentum causing it to slide several meters before stopping. The fierce saber lion arrogantly circled the helplessly struggling giant antelope on the ground, pondering where to sink its teeth first, whether it be the sweet innards or the chewy spine. Suddenly, a shadow rapidly expanded in the sky, with rushing winds surpassing its full sprint speed. It lifted its head warily, letting out a howl and breaking into a life-saving sprint, faster than before, showing its true full strength. Yet it had only covered a few dozen meters when a pair of giant claws descended from the sky, piercing through its body, gripping its spine, lifting it into the air, and beginning to ascend. It howled miserably, its desperate struggles akin to a puppet under the hands of a giant. It was the top predator in this area, yet it faced the apex predator of the biological food chain. Also, one of the powerful creatures of the Icaria world, most closest to perfection, the giant dragon. Thus, it too became prey, struggling helplessly. At the junction between the vast grasslands and the boundless giant wood forest lay a range of mountains, not high. The highest peaks reached about 1,000 meters, serving as the watershed between the grassland and the forest. Within this mountain range stood a towering peak, once an active volcano. But now it lay dormant for unknown hundreds or thousands of years, a dead volcano. The volcanic eruptions of the past left behind volcanic ash, rich in organic matter, which now turned into fertile soil, making the dense forest at the foot of the mountains exceptionally tall. The originally wide crater at the summit was covered with hard volcanic rock, now half excavated to form a dome-like cave. Half of the cave was bathed in sunlight, the other half shrouded in shadows. The sunlit part of the cave was clear and bright, with uneven ground covered by a thick layer of wild grass, scattered with several large eggs of various colors. Under the sunlight, they shimmered in different hues, dark red, deep green, gray-black, deep blue, and luminous white. Light played across the giant eggs, brightening and dimming, as if the eggs were breathing. Gao Xian felt himself constantly sinking into that hazy and profound dream, surrounded by darkness. His consciousness spiraled into the vortex of the dream, descending deeper and deeper. His awareness fluctuated between clarity and dormancy, as countless jumbled and illogical pieces of information flowed through his mind. Occasionally, he would recall his name, his identity, his family, everything about himself. But soon it was drowned in the vast stream of information, and then the fantasy covered its memory, transforming it into another creature with a different name, speaking another language. The darkness gradually made him irritable, his consciousness aimless, yet gradually firm under the rush of information. Until one day he felt his body, and driven by impatience and anger, he smashed the darkness with his own body, bang, once, twice, thrice. Crack, a crack appeared on the dark red giant egg. Before it started spreading, a second crack appeared, with more and more seams accompanied by the intense sound of cracking. In the dimly lit cave, a massive creature was awakened by the sound, opening its huge eyes. Bright eyes seemed like concentrated sunlight, looking at the dark red giant egg emitting sound. The giant egg was covered in cracks and finally couldn't hold and shattered. A juvenile dragon, spreading its limbs, opened its big eyes to see it, seemingly startled, suddenly hiccuped. A thin smoke mixed with sparks ventured out from the little cub's nostrils and mouth, then the cub lifted its head, roared loudly, uttering its first dragon language in this world. Karon Gogomola, this is the hatchling's name in this world. Although his true name is much longer, he evidently does not enjoy announcing a menu. The newborn cub is as big as a newborn foal, covered in tiny and fragmented red scales all over its body, but its claws on limbs are still soft. Even the horns on its head, like two bumps, are soft, the nose's bone is soft too, the wings droop, not yet able to support and spread. After about a dozen minutes, the cub's claws and scales will begin to harden, and so will the double horns on its head and the small horns on its nose. In a few days, the scales will start thickening, claws and double horns will become real tools of attack. What the newborn cub needs most right now is nourishment, eating till its belly is full. To gain enough nutrition and energy to activate its body and grow organs that are not yet fully developed, and quickly adapt to its body. But Karon doesn't dare move. The dragon race's innate supernatural vision allows him to clearly see the powerful creature within the shadow-covered cave. Just the hideous and fierce head is bigger than him, it didn't seem like he'd even make a filling snack for the other. A sharp, rough, large horn grows diagonally upward from the nose, with a mouth full of sharp teeth. A pair of massive ears sporadically flapping, the tough blue scales wrapped around soft yet resilient body. The robust front body blocks the rear, revealing only a tail that continuously swings. Clearly this is a blue dragon. And himself, Karon gaped, looking at the dense and bright red scales on his forelegs, combining the information in his mind. He actually is a dragon too, but how did he become a dragon? Yet, beneath the temporarily chaotic mind, a thought surfaced subconsciously, luckily not the weakest of the 5-color dragons, the white dragon. Lucky my ass, the other is a blue dragon, a giant dragon of a different kind. The situation is evidently unfavorable. Though he didn't sense any malice from the other, there was even a familiar feeling of kinship. However, 5-color dragons are born as evil dragons, without understanding the other's intentions. The innate threat felt by the weak towards the strong constantly lingered in the mind. So he must ascertain the other's attitude, even though his belly already growled constantly from hunger. The giant dragon in the cave finally stepped out, revealing a strong and graceful body. The 14-meter-long body shows it's at least a young dragon, maybe even a youth dragon. If not for the fierce dragon head and the bone protuberances on the tail, the soft and resilient body would look like a flying magical big cat. Its eyes also like a cat's, light blue, with a vertical yellow pupil at the center. Like a cat and differently scrutinizing the tiny one ahead, who seemed a bit different from the naturally impulsive, arrogant, reckless dragons. Gradually cold eyes transformed into proud ones, the blue dragon lowered its high-held head, and the breath between its nostrils made little Karon feel unstable. Oh, how healthy, strong yet cautious and timid little cub, you needn't fear me. The blue dragon opened its mouth, gentle dragon language accompanied by a subtle electric arc flashed across its open maw. You are the cub I hatched, you should naturally see me as your mother, I will nurture you until you can be independent, fulfilling a mother's responsibility. The little hatchling looked quizzically at the enormous head ahead, the awakened consciousness searched all the dictionaries of the red dragon heritage, none contained the word responsibility. This blue dragon, it's a peculiar five-color dragon, maybe a rare good dragon, Karon pondered. Yet without the worldly knowledge of this life, Karon didn't know, as the rare evil dragon that likes forming packs, blue dragons sometimes pick up and hatch eggs abandoned by other giant dragons of different species, then nurture these hatchlings until they become a firm strength in the family. And in return, you should hunt for me, become the strongest shield and sharpest weapon in my hand, conquer territories for me, find treasures for me, your powerful beloved are also my beloved. The blue dragon's huge eyes stared at the little one before it, awaiting his response. All right, I have overestimated the integrity of the five-color dragons, turns out there's this whole ulterior motive here waiting for me. Little Karon seemed to see a street lamp rise behind the blue dragon, then the problem arose, how tall must a street lamp be to hang a giant dragon? This damned blue dragon, imagines having me work for her all life long, used to work, now arrived here became a dragon still needs to work, isn't my coming here in vain? Moreover, she even wants me to proclaim and establish myself as a fighter for her in the future, even a double-flowered red stick still accounts for something, humph, though she isn't ugly, well, considering little Karon's dragon beauty standards now, the blue dragon not only isn't ugly, she's rather fine, still thinking too nice. Damn it, just wait, when I grow, things will change. Little Karon turned many thoughts in his mind, though unwilling to be a working dragon, evidently now he doesn't have the ability to refuse, hence obediently lowered his noble head, muttering in dragon language, yes, mother. Source, webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 2, Eating and Troubles. Chapter 2, Eating and Troubles. The blue dragon's eyes were filled with satisfaction, like a big cat that had eaten its favorite canned food. Having gained another worker, the delighted blue dragon opened its mouth wide, gently wrapping its tongue around the little one before it and cautiously holding it in its mouth. He turned and placed it between the ferocious saber-toothed lion, whose spine was torn yet still possessed formidable life force, and the giant antelope, whose body was long since dead and rigid. Eat, my little one, feast to your heart's content, I anticipate your growth, said the blue dragon, turning to step into the cave, lazily lying down and squinting at the juvenile dragon while it ate. The two beast carcasses before it appeared as giant creatures in comparison to the juvenile dragon's size, but the innate dragon sense told little Karon which target was more energy-rich. So the ravenous juvenile dragon scrambled and rolled over the ferocious saber-toothed lion's belly, biting down along the torn spine of the giant beast. He tore away the thick hide, tough for the juvenile dragon, until the belly was exposed, and began to gnaw on the fat-rich abdomen, devouring it greedily. Blood and fat splattered but did not affect little Karon's appetite. When starving, humans eat dirt, let alone a dragon. Physiological instincts were more influential, thus the metallic-scented blood and flesh became sweet delicacies, tempting his greedy appetite. After devouring a large chunk of the abdomen, little Karon squeezed into the ferocious saber-toothed lion's abdominal cavity, carefully searching for the heart and liver. To avoid cutting his intestines and tainting himself with peculiar flavors, he was not yet at the stage of indiscriminate eating. For the juvenile dragon, the organs were the most nutrient-rich food, conducive for growth, and the most digestible. The rich nutrients could expedite the growth of some organs within his body that had yet to grow fully and mature, turning him into a dining dragon. Only when his belly became distended like a pregnant toad did little Karon halt his dining spree. He began to lick clean the blood and flesh stuck to his body and claws, then waddled like a turtle over to lie beside the blue dragon mother. His mind was foggy after eating, drowsiness surged, and he drifted into sleep, his consciousness returning to that familiar dream vortex, sleeping peacefully. As one of the closest to perfect creatures in this world, one of the most enviable traits of the giant dragon is that they do not need to meditate or venture. They simply slumber peacefully in their nests, and their power grows with their size. Theoretically, this can compound infinitely. The slumber of a giant dragon is also a critical process for slowly absorbing and digesting the legacy of the dragon race, and as they age, they will gradually awaken their own magic abilities. Though each type has the same fixed awakening spells, the differences between individuals are especially substantial. However, little Karon is not yet at the stage of hibernation, merely normal sleep. Juvenile dragons undergo a bodily adaptation process that lasts several days to over 10 days, depending on the individual's variance, coordinating their body and organs to adapt to bodily regulation. Generally, once the juvenile dragon's horn claws and wing claws on its wings have hardened normally, and the scales have adapted accordingly, it is time for the juvenile dragon to enter its first slumber. Whimper, the young juvenile dragon opened its eyes, lazily spreading its pale pink flesh-colored wings. Its tail wagged as it yawned, spewing a few sparks. During the early juvenile stage, the red dragon's scale armor was dense, bright, and vivid, like tiny, vibrant ruby art pieces, exuding a red aura even under the dim cave dome. Such conspicuous color in the wild is a dangerous allure and does not benefit the young red dragon's survival outside. Predators would spot this flashy creature among the 5-color dragons immediately. And prey would detect the red dragon's approach early and flee, so despite that a red dragon hatchling, fresh from the egg shell, could rely on power and sharp teeth to battle adult humans, without parental protection, only death awaits. However, little Karon has been living a pampered life these few days, being waited on hand and foot well, no clothes to wear, but certainly food arrives promptly. Every day, he only needs to snuggle and snooze alongside blue dragon mother Carlet in the cave, while the other juvenile male blue dragon Axi is responsible for hunting, delivering prey on schedule daily. Oxa does not reside on this mountain, his lair is on the summit of a short mountain a few miles from blue dragon mother's cave. Oxa is blue dragon mother Carlet's suitor. The two dragons met during travels and were drawn to the blue dragon's graceful and slender physique. Thus he was guided by the blue dragon mother to form a contract, serving the blue dragon mother, while in adulthood he would have priority in mating rights with blue dragon Carlet. Upon learning this, little Karon expressed, "The working guy fell in love. Axi's life is essentially over. No matter who you are, however wonderful, life will always have its troubles." Little Karon's trouble comes from another female red dragon, who was born a day after him, his sister Kleena. The two eggs came from the same clutch, and they were born not long apart, with roughly the same size. Kleena had already started provoking little Karon, whether during meals or when resting. Although they were still just juvenile dragons, giant dragons could be considered creatures that are born with inherent knowledge. The evil dragon inheritance in their minds naturally endowed these juvenile dragons with a sophisticated worldview and values based on the true dragon race, which is why if you observe any giant dragons, they all appear stubborn and inflexible. No need to doubt their intelligence, it's simply because they are deeply influenced by the legacy of the dragon race. This is a natural strength of the giant dragons, but also a natural flaw. The evil nature of the dragon lineage within their blood constantly affects giant dragons, making them greedier, more prone to rage, worship power, and always thinking about challenging the status of other dragons. Kleena had already begun to resent Karen's priority order during meals, unsatisfied with the fact that the delectable innards and tender abdomen were claimed by Karon, while she could only gnaw on the haunch, even though it is also a fat-rich part. Not only that, Kleena also wanted to establish a leadership position over Karon. Red dragons are naturally ambitious and are famously matriarchal. The lazy and strong male dragons couldn't be bothered to establish families, and those powerful male red dragons preferred to be lone rangers, rampant bandits. In families formed by red dragons, it is usually the red dragon queen who is the supreme ruler, so it's understandable that the young female dragon wants to dominate the young male dragon. However, forming families is not common for the lone, bandit-like red dragons and can be considered quite rare. Even among female red dragons, only a few like the troublesome business of establishing families. This is one reason why red dragon families are matriarchal. Only female red dragons are willing to form families, while male red dragons are just freeloading bastards. Karon, too, didn't want to indulge this little female dragon, even though he didn't mind someone riding on his back. What he cared about was the method of being ridden, and it was obvious that this method was not acceptable. The food rich in energy nutrients was one of his growth aids, and this alone he wouldn't concede to the little female dragon. Though he had a stable consciousness formed from the old world, and it wasn't blankly accepting the imprints from the dragon race inheritance, he was more conscious in controlling himself, avoiding more imprints. His now free will did not want to be controlled by other factors, even if it were his own body. After all, he himself was a control freak. The difference was that while many control freaks enjoyed controlling others, he only controlled himself. Even so, Karon was still deeply affected by the evil dragon bloodline in his body, perhaps because his will wasn't strong enough, or perhaps because his independent soul wasn't powerful enough. He felt troubled by the evil roots inherent in the evil dragon and became more arrogant, impulsive, and combative. And the source of his troubles stemmed from Kleena's growth. Red dragons are matriarchal and have many queen dragons that dominate the giant dragons. This same age female red dragon was noticeably larger than the male red dragon in the early stages. Now, after a few days of growth and development, Kleena was visibly slightly bigger than the same age Karon. If things continued this way, by the time the two juvenile dragons passed through their first sleep stage, the size difference would be more noticeable, and maybe by then, Kleena would be a circle larger than Karon. Although this was happening in the early stage, just as girls typically mature earlier than boys. In the middle to later stages, the male dragon would gradually surpass the female dragon, but Karon didn't want to be suppressed in the early stage. If he had no other way, the gap between him and Kleena in the early stage would only grow, and in the end, he would have no choice but to bow his head in defeat. As Karon thought about this, every time he slept, his consciousness would sink into that whirlpool of dreams, and he could feel it was a gift from the old world and a blessing from his rebirth. But he was like a man guarding a treasure vault without a key, he still couldn't grasp what exactly this gift was or how to use it. Roar! Thinking of this, little Karon's previously happily wagging little tail came to a stop. Sullen, his head rested weakly on the ground, as he let out a displeased low growl. The sleeping blue dragon mother, disturbed by his low growl, opened her eyes, her long tail lifted and coiled, its tip gently tapping on the little cub's head. Karon looked at the dragon mother's coiling tail, and his eyes brightened, tossing his troubles aside. With a display of tantrums and claws, he pounced, biting the tail tip with all four limbs pedaling, shaking his head, and biting fiercely. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 3, Red Dragon Dump Truck. Chapter 3, Red Dragon Dump Truck. Thank you, diligent and mighty Lord Axi. Karon nodded in gratitude to the young male blue dragon Axi, who was on the verge of entering adolescence, after he dropped the carcass of a 4-meter-long long-toothed wild boar onto the peak of the cave's summit cliff. Currently, daily meals are Axi's responsibility. Carlet, being a young dragon, needs to eat only once every 10 to 15 days. Unlike the juvenile dragons that need daily feeding, the constant interactions have slowly made Karon and Axie familiar with each other. This was not Karon trying to curry favor, dragons in society don't call it ingratiation. He believed that if even stones could be moved by Buddhist scriptures, then flattering a giant dragon as a true dragon wasn't out of the question. If Axie could be moved, perhaps he might help suppress the feud between Kleena and Karon in the future. Clearly, Karon's five-colored evil dragon nature wasn't pure enough, and he misjudged the disposition of a giant dragon. Every living group in the world has a hierarchy to establish its status within the group and to maintain order. Some are inherent, some are established, and some evolve naturally. And the way dragons ensure order within their group is through strength. So the young dragon Axie simply nodded and then watched the scene with interest. The young female dragon Kleena, with her red, finely scaled body, looked almost identical to Karon, although her scales were slightly darker. At that moment, she stood on the belly of the long-toothed wild boar, gazing intently at Karon who had turned to face her, growling lowly. She was provoking him. Karon grew somewhat angry, his fury flaring inside him, ignited by the constant provocations. He planted his hind legs firmly on the ground, lifted his forelegs, and arched his torso, sparks flickering from his nostrils. His voice, deepened by rage but still betraying his youth, said, "Are you challenging me, my foolish and ignorant sister?" Hearing these words, the young female dragon's eyes, nearly as bright as her scales, instantly flashed with anger, and she lunged with the swiftness of a few months-old colt. "The weak should obey the strong, my pitiful and feeble brother." Her sharp teeth came in a furious roar, aiming directly at Karon's neck. To Karon, the juvenile dragon's attack was too simple and straightforward. Battles between juveniles, due to their similar size and strength, often hinged on seizing the initiative. But Karon, having anticipated this, gathered strength in his hind legs. As her sharp teeth nearly grazed his skin, he rose onto his hind legs, contracting his chest and abdomen to avoid the point of impact. Simultaneously, like a ram's charging horns, he swung his head from the side and slammed down suddenly, delivering a fierce red dragon headbutt to the side of the young female dragon who had lost her footing. The young female dragon's entire body was sent flying, rolling several times before crashing heavily to the ground. The inherently strong body of a dragon was unharmed. The young female dragon, dizzy with anger, growled and rose to attack again, but Karon, now on the offensive, was already preparing his next move. Seizing the initiative, Karon charged ahead with his head slightly lowered, like a red dragon bulldozer, crashing heavily into the young female dragon's front leg. With powerful force and the momentum of the charge, the young female dragon was instantly sent tumbling through the air like a struck sandbag, flipping several times before slamming into the ground. The raging fury in Karon's bloodline allowed no opportunity for escape. He pursued her from the air, wings flapping. Landing heavily on one of the young female dragon's forelegs, which was already dizzy from the onslaught, there was a cracking sound as she let out a shrill wail of pain. Her leg was broken. "Give up, Kleena, you're too weak to stand against me," Karon bellowed, standing dominantly above, sparks surging from his mouth and nose, as he pressed down hard on her broken leg. The destructive and cruel nature in his red dragon bloodline flooded him with killing intent, resisting the brutal desires in his heart with difficulty. Blood trickling from her mouth, it was clear that her inner organs were already injured, but the stubborn gaze she held was defiantly unyielding. She believed it was just a momentary lapse. She thought her strength was still superior to Karon's, refusing to lower her head in surrender. "Ack!" wailed the obstinate young female dragon, all four of her legs now crushed under Karon's repeated stomps. Even with a true dragon's resilient body, the pain was enough to almost send her into unconsciousness, yet her stubborn gaze remained fixated on Karon, whose eyes burned ever brighter, like flames. The destructive desire in Karon's bloodline and the fury swelling within his chest intensified until he could no longer hold it back. A thread of red light ignited from his chest and abdomen. Unconsciously, Karon opened his mouth, and the fire born of destruction and fury surged forth, ready to consume everything. Klina's expression finally transformed to one of terror as she saw the wall of flame approaching. Closing her eyes, she shrieked, "I surrender, stop it now! Stop, you cunning little whelp!" The blue dragon quietly sneaking a peek finally revealed itself, as the observing Axi flapped his wings and descended with a dragon breath. A subtle lightning breath arrived in an instant, paralyzing Karon's body. Karon's body, as if hit by a petrification skill, fell stiffly to the ground. Little Karon was very injured because he was hung up and beaten by the blue dragon mother with her tail. Generally speaking, fights within a dragon group don't matter to the leader, who won't interfere easily and might even support it. The nature of giant dragons, who revere strength, dictates that battles will always happen. Given the strong bodies and powerful recovery abilities of giant dragons, as long as the injuries aren't fatal, they can recover, at worst by going into a slumber. But this time, little Karon, who couldn't control himself, actually wanted to kill his kin. Such behavior was too brutal even for the savage five-colored dragons, so the blue dragon mother unusually gave him a beating. Karon lay dispiritedly next to the long-toothed wild boar that was supposed to be his feast, motionless. He won the battle and obtained the food dominance from then on. If he allowed it, the young female dragon could join him in eating. If he didn't, the young female dragon would have to eat leftovers thereafter. Even though Blue Dragon Carlet was dissatisfied with Karon's desire to kill kin, it could not and would not change the established outcome of the dragon group's hierarchy. To change this result would invite challenges from all giant dragons in the clan, including Licking Dragon Axi. Karon's throat was injured due to the early eruption of dragon breath, and it needed rest and recovery. Dragon breath is a natural ability possessed by every true dragon. The red dragon's breath is flame, capable of spewing a cone of fire. Usually, the breath is just red flame, while the more dangerous variant is an azure flame. Moreover, the red dragon can freely control the intensity of its breath. If needed, it can charge up to emit a more destructive flame. However, this ability is obtained when a juvenile dragon's body organs are fully developed. Breathing fire with underdeveloped organs caused strain on his fragile throat. Karon tilted his head, looking at the little female dragon lying miserably next to the blue dragon mother's abdomen with her eyes closed for a nap. This little female dragon had her chest, stomach, and head partly burned. Even the red dragon's natural resistance to fire, which allows it to bathe in lava from birth, couldn't completely negate the destructive dragon breath's damage. Because dragon breath is not purely physical flame, as powerful magical creatures, all attacks of the evil dragon carry strong magic power. At this moment, the little female dragon emitted a burnt aroma that stirred up hunger. Despite her reconnected limbs, she still couldn't apply force as they lay on the ground, appearing disconnected from her body, truly a pitiful sight. Karon recalled the scene where his anger burned uncontrollably and had some guesses in his mind. He wasn't fond of his thoughts being influenced by the evil dragon blood within his body these past few days. He had consciously been suppressing the evil dragon bloodline, which constantly opposed his will, until it erupted so fiercely today. It seems he shouldn't constantly suppress and fight against the evil dragon's nature in his blood, but should appropriately vent the repressed evil dragon nature. Like a dam, one cannot indefinitely store water, but needs to release it on time. After the previous outburst, Karon felt an exceptional clarity of mind, with the ever-simmering destruction and anger in his bloodline much calmer. This allowed him to easily suppress the evil dragon nature, with the rational thought that once belonged to humans taking the upper hand. Shaking his exceptionally clear head, Karon sat upright on his hind legs. His sufficiently tough and sharp front claws easily ripped open the belly of the long-toothed wild boar, deftly extending his head to find the heart as big as a basin, and grabbed it with a bite. Sweet blood flowed through his dry throat, sparking a desire to crush the heart and swallow it into his stomach. Suppressing his body's desire, Karon carried the dripping heart over to the resting little female dragon Klina and gently placed it down, then used a claw to rouse the resting little female dragon Klina. Angry and helpless, Kleena glared fiercely at Karon with her big vertical pupils, her somewhat immature draconic language growling with overly apparent rage. I acknowledge your status, are you here to show off? Karon Gogomola. Just like an angry human female calling out a full name, the little female dragon also grit her teeth and called out Karon's full name. Bang! Karon's dragon claw formed into a fist and hit the hard-headed little female dragon's head. Don't use your simple and barren mind to guess my actions. He unclenched his fist-like claw and pushed the large heart in front of Kleena, who temporarily couldn't move and could only raise her head in anger. Ignoring the brightened vertical pupils due to anger, he said, "Eat it, fool, don't let your injuries affect your upcoming first slumber." The stubborn and hard-headed little female dragon intended to refuse, but the refusal turned into a pool of saliva upon reaching her mouth, dripping onto the heart below with a sizzling sound. The stubborn little female dragon could only glare fiercely at the detestable guy in front of her, snorting. She raised her head, feigning arrogance, "I accept your favor," then turned her sorrow and anger into appetite, biting into the plump heart and devouring it ravenously. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 4, Bloodline Manifestation, Innate Ability Solidification. Chapter 4, Bloodline Manifestation, Innate Ability Solidification. In days of idleness and abundance, the first slumber of the hatchlings soon arrived. The blessed hatchlings didn't need to make any preparations, they just had to consume enough food. At least 3 times their own weight in food to sustain the growth and development during slumber. Kleena's injuries had long healed with ample food, and Karon allowed her to eat with him, but she couldn't snatch food. The choicest, energy-rich parts were reserved for Karon to eat first. So now she was buried in the rump of a white-haired wild bull, gnawing voraciously, even crunching the hard bones to swallow. Karon routinely started with the energy-rich heart, then the tender, chewy breast muscle, and finally the delicious ribs, all his favorites. Only when he could eat no more, and even breathing caused oil bubbles, did Karon stop eating. He dragged himself to a corner of the cave, curled up with his tail around his head. With relaxed wings covering his eyes, leaving only the flapping ears and winding sharp red horns exposed. No dragon can autonomously determine their slumber time, moreover, slumber time increases with age. The first slumber of a hatchling lasts about 10 to 15 days, since their not yet fully developed bodies can sustain only that much consumption. The second slumber lasts a month and so on, until the young dragon stage, when slumber is measured in years. Today is Karon's first slumber, he will slumber for about 10 to 15 days, a crucial event for the hatchling. During slumber, hatchlings truly digest the dragon race's inheritance and awaken with their innate dragon power aura. Moreover, the body autonomously adjusts its development based on bloodline growth, developing new organs, and individual differences become more pronounced. Currently, the young female dragon Kleena and little Karon look almost identical, except Kleena's scales are a bit darker. But once the first slumber is complete, both dragons will undergo earth-shattering changes, and many individual differences will be particularly noticeable. Originally larger than Karon, Kleena will greatly surpass him upon awakening, causing Karon to worry if he will be able to suppress the headstrong young female dragon in the future. Even though little Karon feels the simple and crude attack techniques of the young female dragon pose no problem, as fighting requires not only technique but also talent. However, once the disparity in power and size reaches a certain point, a situation like overwhelming power defeats 10 techniques could occur. The thought of being overshadowed in the future, the rebellious scene, fills Karon with an urgent sense of crisis for growth. During this period of reflection, he wonders if suddenly finding himself in this world was due to luck or misfortune, but it shouldn't be that simple. He had been living his life normally, only to find himself in a different world after a dream, leaving him with many doubts. Oh, who knows when he can become as powerful and free as Blue Dragon Mother Carlette. Perhaps with Carlette's power, he would have self-preservation abilities to start exploring this world and gradually uncover the truth of why he came here. Karon glanced at the massive blue dragon lying inside the cave through a gap in his flesh wings, thoughts swirling in his mind. Excessive fullness redirected his blood flow slowly to the stomach, as drowsiness crept into his mind. The red dragon hatchling Karon, filled with a sense of crisis and a desire for strength, succumbed to his life's first slumber. Karon's consciousness returned to a familiar scene, and facing the mysterious colorless, formless vortex in the dream, a strange feeling arose. In slumber, the consciousness of all giant dragons sinks into the dragon race's bloodline inheritance, fully digesting it, akin to a mortal in a death-like sleep, hardly aroused by normal disturbances. During this time, even if someone quietly approached a giant dragon, they wouldn't notice, realizing it only after a few cuts. Often, the slumber of a giant dragon is the opportune moment for dragon slayer teams to make their mark, one reason why most giant dragons favor enslaving many beloveds. Karon's consciousness, along with his slumbering body, sank into an expansive, endless, surging river of blood. This is the embodiment of the red dragon bloodline within the giant dragon, the place where the red dragon inheritance hides, and where Karon's consciousness sleeps. Yet, all of Karon's consciousness, immersed in slumber, could still sense or see that vortex hidden within the dream, as if part of his consciousness hovered above, overseeing from an omniscient viewpoint, the vortex formed by countless rings of water ripples. That part of consciousness was utterly rational, indifferent, unperturbed, and existed beyond control, even by Karon himself. But at a certain moment, that part of consciousness suddenly sensed Karon's feelings of crisis and desire, thus stirring itself. The vortex's power, intangible, formless, colorless, noiseless yet perceptible, was drawn, the power that couldn't be seen or touched, only sensed by soul consciousness, transformed into strands. These strands pierced the space barrier, embedding deeply into the blood river embodiment of the bloodline, leaving the original swirling vortex with only its core center. The legacy and treasures scattered within the bloodline were gradually lifted by the mysterious power infused into the vortex, weaving together into a bundle, eventually solidifying. The mysterious power merged within, becoming complex principles and rules transformed into comprehensible information for Karon, sinking into the depths of his consciousness. Once Karon's consciousness absorbed this information, he would understand the changes occurring within himself, the bloodline manifestation, talent solidification, supralimit state growth. The manifested bloodline talent power took root in the blood river, becoming a source, gradually influencing the entire river. The talent power flowed with the river through Karon's body, nourishing and transforming the slumbering hatchling. The talent's power slowly permeated the bones. The giant dragon's skeleton became sturdier during growth, the body frame expanding, and the hatchling continuously grew, with growth limits increasing slowly. His size stopped growing upon reaching the size of an adult yellow bull, not because he'd reached his current growth limit. His body had merely self-adjusted to the current adaptive growth state, meaning his body was currently only the foundational version for future development. Only the basic framework was built, expanding the bottlenecks and restrictions of size development. The body needed to supply remaining nutrients and energy to internal organ systems and muscles for adaptive development. Nourished by bloodline talent, the hatchling's heart grew a size larger, with a slower but more forceful beat, each contraction pumping vast amounts of blood through expanded vessels, quickly delivering it to other parts. Many organs developed along with this. The body began growing numerous magic power organs and many tiny channels flowing completely with magic. As a magical creature, the giant dragon began perfecting its body during slumber. Many magic channels linked to the giant dragon's wings, many others to its throat, where the magic power breath organ began forming next to the existing breath organ. The original fire dragon's breath inherently contained subtle magic power, now with a dedicated magic power breath organ forming, Karon's future breath would pack terrifying power. A physical dragon breath mixed with a magic dragon breath would intensify elemental reactions during the breath process, resulting in unpredictable outcomes, unknown even to Karon. This means Karon's future opponents would need resistance and means to handle both physical and magical flames, and be wary of the delayed reactions post-breath. Externally on the body, the hatchling's changes were equally conspicuous, with initially bright, vivid scales darkening to a deep red. The membrane wings, now extending twice the body's length, were covered by a layer of dense, thin red scales, transforming into scale armor wings. And the muscles on the limbs grew fuller, differing from the streamlined silhouette of a female red dragon. The male red dragon's muscles were more robust, exuding strength. The hatchling's delicate and somewhat adorable head grew more defined contours, with tiny spines beginning to grow along the statuesque cheeks, further thickening the winding backward-growing horns, lending the hatchling a fierce, menacing look. Originally slender and elegant, the neck grew additional muscles, the layers wrapping the hatchling's neck appearing powerful. The slumbering hatchling began, like the red dragons in his memory, showcasing its own sharpness. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 5, Young Dragon Group. Chapter 5, Young Dragon Group. The sleeping juvenile dragon's eyelids remained tightly shut, but at a certain moment began to slightly flicker, as a faint aura rose from the giant dragon's body. It spread like flowing water over most of the cave. This was the dragon's powerful weapon for intimidating the weak and deterring the strong dragon power. In the domain covered by dragon power, weaker-willed enemies found their spirits constrained and intimidated, unable to act autonomously, while even strong-willed enemies felt constant pressure on their spirits. Evidently, Karon, who was awakening from slumber, couldn't yet fully control the dragon power, startling the juvenile dragons biting, fighting, and playing on the sunny other half of the cave floor. Karon's first slumber lasted slightly longer than he anticipated, likely due to temporarily restricting his physical growth and using stored nutrients and energy for internal regulation and development. Thus, 20 days had passed since he entered slumber. During this time, several juvenile dragons were successively born under Blue Dragon Mother's magical incubation: 2 white dragons, a green dragon with scales like the jade dragon, a blue dragon, and a black dragon. This was the hatching result of the dragon eggs Blue Dragon Mother painstakingly picked from the wilderness. Many 5-color dragons abandon eggs in the wilderness before reaching adulthood due to the lack of a fixed nest or sheer laziness. A significant portion ends up nurturing juveniles born after reaching adulthood, also due to the demands of evil dragon god Tiamat. These juvenile dragons were merely a dozen days old, with little difference in size. The weakest black dragon was still half a size bigger than a horse of 3 to 5 months. At this moment, the juvenile dragon group looked in surprise toward the source of the emanating dragon power, then began to gingerly gather beside the most powerful red dragon, Kleena, present on the field. The juvenile dragons were of the true dragon race, and dragon power didn't suppress them as rigorously as other races. What startled the young dragon group was not the dragon power, but the peerlessly distinct red dragon stepping out of the shadowy cave. Though still a juvenile himself, his body was nowhere near the Blue Dragon Mother's deep within the cave, but his limbs and thorax back were packed with prominent, bulging muscles, indicative of the formidable strength the red dragon prototype, far exceeding other evil dragon species. Even if compared solely on strength within the same age, the greatest golden dragon among the metal dragons in the good dragon faction would not overpower the red dragon at this moment. The three-dimensional face, adorned with dark red dragon horns transforming from jawline to cheeks, with a faint metallic sheen, added a degree of ferociousness to the red dragon. The light red vertical pupils were not filled with the indifference of beasts but rather a spark of wisdom, creating an added sense of pressure when gazing at enemies. On the wide, solid wings, red markings started appearing, with a tendency to spread across the entire body of dragon scales, indicating that this red dragon had awakened its own flame magic. These markings, born of fire attribute magic power, allowed for faster flow of magic power within the giant dragon, enhancing control and magnifying spell power. But not every red dragon develops these markings, just as not every gorilla is born with wisdom. The scales, gradually turning deeper crimson, were becoming thicker and adorned with a metallic luster, with occasional grey-yellow light streaming through. The inheritance of the juvenile dragons informed them this symbolized the red dragon awakening other special talents. And of course, the red dragon, born as the monarch of fire and magma, bore the potential to become an elemental master controlling earth and metal. So it was roughly predictable what kind of special talents the red dragon had awakened. What kind of monster is this? Such a thought naturally arose in the hearts of the juvenile dragons, regarded as monsters by most creatures in Icania. The green jade dragon, Antagena, looked at the small-headed and even weaker female red dragon, Kleena, next to her, whose body length surpassed Karon's somewhat, contrastingly seeming like a knight in full heavy armor against a plain soldier. Unable to resist nudging the little female dragon's shoulder with her wingtip, she glanced at Karon, spreading wings and moving his body, and whispered, "Are you going to challenge that talented monster? I think you should reconsider." Influenced by the Red Dragon heritage and aspiring to become the Red Dragon Queen, Kleena saw the retreating expressions on the physically persuaded juvenile dragons' faces over this period. Even her compatriot dragon Antagena looked concerned. A flicker of anger stirred within her, humming defiantly, "Are you all dragons, yet afraid of another dragon? I wouldn't be afraid of Karon, humph. I'll find a chance to challenge him, and then defeat him, bringing him under my rule." Growth after the slumber period had inflated the little female dragon somewhat. "Then I suggest you challenge him now while he's still in the weakened period after awakening from slumber, so after defeating him, we can help hold him down, then make him acknowledge your leadership among the juvenile dragons." The green dragon's eyes twinkled. Antagena, naturally fond of schemes and conspiracies as a member of the green dragon species, enticed her. "Isn't it taking advantage of Karon? He won't yield." The slightly martial yet not overwhelmingly principled Kleena hesitated, although the proposal did tempt her dragon heart. "We'll assist you, and we outnumber him, he won't be able to contend with us." The half-blood white dragon, naturally more muddled-minded than other five-color dragons, chipped in. This white dragon was evidently smarter than its absent-minded kindred. Only the black dragon and blue dragon exchanged a silent glance, not speaking up. Kleena hesitated for a second, accepted the suggestion, squeezed out of the dragon group, and growled lowly. It was like an engine continually changing pitch. Roar! This was a provocation to Karon. "Karon, I challenge you. As the victor, I will become the leader of the juvenile dragons. If you dare not accept the challenge, bow your head and acknowledge me as your queen." The young female dragon Kleena growled lowly, declaring war on Karon, and was learning from Karon's previous approach, with her back legs pressing heavily on the ground, her front legs ready to spring. She felt quite clever, intending to use Karon's method to defeat him and then break all his limbs too. There was no doubt that the pettiness and vengefulness of a giant dragon were common knowledge among all creatures on Icania. Karon did not answer. He just growled deeply, using his strong and powerful hind legs to stand upright, lightly flapping his wide and robust wings as he soared into the sky. He knew that no matter what kind of opponent he faced, he should not allow them to easily comprehend his offensive intentions and tactics. Although he was now unafraid of a direct power confrontation with the young female dragon, he hovered in midair for a moment and then swooped down. Kleena calmly awaited Karon's pounce, and as Karon's oversized and sharp dragon claw neared, her back legs powered her to leap upright. As her upper body retracted to evade Karon's attack, her front claws and a mouth full of small tusks were poised to bite the passing Karon and pull him down. But when Kleena rose upright with a low growl, what she met wasn't Karon's attacking claws but instead a sudden halt by Karon just beyond her attack range. A conical flame mixed with explosive and destructive magic power gushed out from Karon's open mouth. Kleena instinctively closed her eyes to avoid the scorching damage from the dragon breath. Even though the red dragon's innate flame resistance was extraordinarily excellent, almost immune to physical flame damage, her relatively weak eyes could not withstand the spray of dragon breath. In that instant, Kleena heard her neck bones wail and then crashed heavily to the ground. Karon's massive front claw pinned down Kleena's neck, while another claw held the young female dragon's mouth shut, completely ignoring Kleena's struggling flaps and twisting body. Amidst the dust raised by its tail, the ferocious head approached the young female dragon's wide-open eyes, the four eyes meeting. The vertical pupils gazing down showed no anger or desire for destruction from the previous battle, only calmness and indifference. "This is the last time you offend me." Karen's head, growing stronger and fiercer in the glory of a victor, began to exude authority. The claw on her mouth tapped her cheek again and again with powerful words cloaked in calm and gentle tones. "I am in a good mood today, so I choose to forgive your foolish offense. If there is a next time, the cost will be your fragile life." The accumulated anger from the pride and humiliation of being easily defeated twice finally shattered Kleena's arrogance, with her inflated will returning to rationality. The shadow in her heart revealed weakness and submission through her eyes. Her still flapping wings drooped in weakness, and her twisting body quieted down, with only the sound of acquiescent dragon language softly echoing, "Forgive my reckless offense, I will abide by your will." "Good, you've finally pulled your brain out of your ass and used it," Karon said, satisfied as he released his claws. Turning around, Dragon Sight scanned the surrounding juvenile dragons and spoke, "Now, what about you? Do you wish to challenge me? I can give you a chance." Even the most powerful Kleena among the juvenile dragons was toyed with like a plaything. Possessing wisdom even greater than humans, the giant dragons would assess the situation, especially since that damned red dragon's fists, as large as sandbags, clearly hadn't had enough. Now stepping forward would only mean getting beaten. Proud giant dragons wouldn't engage in such unprofitable business. The green dragon was the first to straightforwardly lower its proud giant dragon head. "You are the leader of the juvenile dragons, I will obey you." The clever white dragon used its hind leg to kick its dazed fellow standing beside it, joining in the lowering of heads to echo the green dragon's words. The silent black dragon and blue dragon also lowered their heads, acknowledging Karen's leadership among the juvenile dragons. Full of self-satisfaction, Karon roared toward the sky, declaring his status and authority as the leader of the juvenile dragons. A louder roar suppressed Karen's voice. The awakened blue dragon Carlet clearly had some bad mood for being disturbed from sleep. Its massive dragon head emerged from behind the thick stone pillar supporting the cave's broad dome, angrily roaring, "Get out, you noisy troublesome little whelps, get out of my nest!" The blue dragon's gigantic pupils flickered with anger as it shouted, "Oxy, you damn lazy dragon, where have you run off to? Get these little whelps out, it's time they have their own place." Thus, the great juvenile dragon leader Karon Gogomola, on his first day in office, was expelled, driven out of this warm, comfortable and secure nest with his weak and helpless dragon group. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 6, Dragon Nest Canyon. Chapter 6, Dragon Nest Canyon. Axie is not lazy, instead, he is more diligent than the average five-color dragon. In contrast, a certain mother dragon that spends her days sleeping after eating and watching the young ones fight is like a thief crying "Stop thief!" This mother dragon is lazier than her kin who indulge in enjoyment, comparable to a sloth in the forest. Since following Carlet to this mountain range and establishing a nest, there hasn't been much time to find suitable beloved, and most giant dragons choose to have beloved after reaching maturity. After establishing the nest, Carlet wholeheartedly focused on incubating the dragon eggs and sleeping, leaving the hunting tasks to Axie. Axie not only has to manage Carlet's diet but also the diet of the juvenile dragons. He needs to regularly patrol the dragon nest's territory, confirm the boundaries of the dragon nest territory, and maintain the dragon group's original territory, as now all juvenile dragons in the dragon group are born, and it's only a matter of time before the dragon group's expansion. The original territory was only within 100 miles around this mountain range, but it won't be able to sustain the growing dragon group with the juvenile dragon's growth since each dragon's growth requires a massive amount of food. Even he is just a young dragon about to enter the adolescent stage, and he is well aware of how much territory is needed to sustain the ever-growing dragon group. Axi can be described as a model of diligence among the five-colored evil dragons. He needs to patrol the territory daily. If his abilities, close to those of a young blue dragon, can solve the issues, he will expand the territory accordingly. If not, he will make markings and warn the juvenile dragons. When the juvenile dragons in the dragon group mature, they can break through here. Axi has no intention of calling Carlet, not because he fears the dragon group leader's power and punishment. It's because, as a licking dragon, he doesn't want Carlet to feel that small obstacles block him and that he needs to seek assistance. He doesn't want to lose this dragon. So, he brought this group of juvenile dragons to a canyon formed between his nest and Carlet's nest and then quickly left to continue his hard-working journey. This canyon is not entirely disconnected from the mountain range. The cliff near the north, close to the grassland, has a thick layer of rock wall connected, like a naturally conjoined arch bridge. The southern canyon close to the forest is completely disconnected, forming a gateway to enter and exit the canyon. A stream flows out from the pond formed by the canyon's sinking and exits through the gateway. The canyon may be narrow for an adult giant dragon, but it's spacious enough for this group of juvenile dragons. At least it's much better than the blue dragon leader Carlet's cave, allowing the juvenile dragons to romp without worrying about waking the sleeping great dragon. The lush green environment clearly satisfies the dragon group, and the juvenile dragons scatter, starting to chisel nests on the canyon walls. They choose the softer stone areas to claw, and the hard and sharp dragon claws make it easy to excavate the stone. The blue dragon likes to bury himself in the ground, so the blue dragons, skilled at digging, choose to excavate their nests at the base of the cliff, advancing much faster than the other juvenile dragons. The black dragon, who prefers water, originally wanted to settle in the canyon's pond, but this pond is the future water source for the juvenile dragons. If a black dragon settles in the water, it will pollute the water, causing the clear pond water to become turbid and foul-smelling, eventually turning into poison water. So the black dragon was scolded by the others using dragon language, feeling quite dirty. He had to reluctantly learn from the blue dragon and become neighbors with them. Antagena, resembling a green emerald dragon, and like her green dragon kin, enjoys fostering trees in the forest and nesting among the trees' giant canopies. But now, as a juvenile dragon, she doesn't have the strength to nest alone, so she chose to dig a nest on the high cliffs with Kleena. As for the white dragon, let's leave that aside for now. Karon chose a nest at the base of the cliff opposite the blue dragon, but he doesn't like being buried in the soil, so he could only honestly dig into the rock wall bit by bit. He plans to put some effort into it. After all, it's his first nest in his dragon life, and his own home must be crafted well to be comfortable. First, he needs to excavate a passage to enter and exit the nest, and the rock, already quite soft, feels like weak tofu under his hard and sharp claws. Karon's formidable strength, combined with the giant dragon's unparalleled energy, quickly bored through the rock wall, creating a 10-meter-long passage that he could barely squeeze through. Then, he began to widen and heighten the passage so he could easily enter and exit the nest. The second step was to dig out two passages a few meters long, left and right, and then in these two interconnecting passages, he excavated a 10-meter corridor parallel to the entrance passage straight into the mountain's belly. He then widened the corridor's corners into elliptical shapes to avoid getting stuck entering and exiting later. The next step focuses on the nest's main point, his resting place. Karon hollowed out the stone wall behind the left and right passageways to form a large circular cave, allowing both passageways to connect to the cave. The 10-meter-thick passageway stone wall at the cave's front became a wind-blocking screen. This setup not only provided good ventilation but also shielded the cave from outside prying eyes. Finally, Karon utilized the earth element he controlled to compact and level the ground, then used dragon flame breath to dry the cave. He then burned the cave's uneven walls, which were marked with claw prints, into smooth surfaces. The molten stone and minerals mixed within flowed down as high-temperature water, forming a crystalline layer on the black-yellow hard ground. Thus, after half a month, the little red dragon's nest was finally completed. Karon curled his forelimbs into a ball, lying on the ground still radiating some warmth, let out a comfortable breath, and enjoyed this moment of unique tranquility. At this moment, this place surprisingly felt like home. "Damn it, Kamid, can you pull your damn stupid head out from your big butt and use it for once? You passed the ball to the wrong dragon, we're on the team with Das." The clever white dragon Gomot, using what he thought were the most elegant swear words learned from Karon, scolded his always slow-to-react brother. He sidestepped to try his best blocking Kleena, who was charging with the metal ball, and was inevitably knocked aside, ending up staring wide-eyed at Blue Dragon Das, watching the little dragoness put the ball into the goal. "Woohoo, today we won, right? I finally won once." The happy green jade dragon Antagena cheered, turning to the black dragon excitedly and asked. Poor Antagena had never won since Karon invented and modified this game that mixed rugby and soccer. Without Karon on the field as the referee, usually, whichever team the strongest little dragoness Kleena was on would have a high chance of winning. Unfortunately, Antagena always ended up on the opposite team. Black Dragon Rosani nodded happily, "We've won, we just need to wait for Karon to announce the results." "Excellent, 26-10, the right-hand team wins," announced Karon, who was squatting on the sidelines serving as the referee, clapping his claws to declare the game's result. "Kleena, Antagena, and Rosani, you will have the right to eat first at dinner tonight, and the most outstanding Kleena will receive a heart as a reward." Hearing the cheers and dejected voices from the juvenile dragons, Karon felt a bit smug. He devised this activity not just for entertainment. On one hand, it could exhaust the dragon cubs' abundant energy, preventing them from causing trouble, which made managing them easier. It also trained the juvenile dragons' physical coordination and reaction abilities. The originally oval rugby ball was also changed to a round shape, which could train the dexterity and strength of the dragon claws. On the other hand, it was to train the juvenile dragons' teamwork ability, strengthening their sense of group coordination for future group hunting and combat among the dragon group. Of course, the most important part was that Karon always held the implicit referee role within the dragon group, with rewards and punishments coming from him. This reinforced the impression that Karon was the dragon who made the final decisions. Leading the naturally unruly dragon group to gradually adapt to following Karon's decisions was Karon's way of taming the juvenile dragons. The subtle influence achieved this way was impossible through sheer intimidation alone. He hoped that one day, when he possessed enough strength to confront Axie and Carlet, these juvenile dragons would instinctively obey and follow him to fight against enemies. This was Karon's thought. He couldn't always remain under Carlet's command, for he had the innate ambition of a giant dragon to rule over others, as well as the scheming mind of a human. Especially after absorbing the swirl of information left in his mind, he knew he would have more talents and means in the future. That was Karon's confidence, although he was still exploring now. Karon unfurled his wings, flying toward the mountaintop, then landed beside Blue Dragon Axie, who was watching intently. Next to the almost 11-meter-long Axie, his 3-meter-long form resembled a small kitten in front of a human. Karon lowered his head to show respect to the diligent Axie. "An interesting game, even I want to join." Axie nodded. His experience was not less than those of the newly born juvenile dragons, so he did not treat the talented red dragon juvenile as casually as the other members, though he was still dismissive. "With Lord Axie's mighty strength, you would undoubtedly be the ultimate winner," Karon complimented, his skill and flattery flowing naturally. "You've managed the juvenile dragons well, saving me a lot of trouble," Blue Dragon Axie said, subtly turning his head to gaze down at the red dragon, who, despite verbally flattering, showed no expression. "Perhaps I should give you some rewards." Karon remained silent for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, "Is Lord Axie planning to reward me with some gold coins? I still don't have any treasures of my own." Blue Dragon Axie also fell silent, then spoke after a while, "I don't have many gold coins either." He spread his wings and flew away, accidentally hitting the mildly hopeful Karon with an open wing and sending him tumbling. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 7, The Pig Sprite. Chapter 7, The Pig Sprite. The cave dimmed, with only Karon's bright and vivid red scales emitting a faint glow in the darkness, like a large, dull red lantern. Karon lay quietly in the cave, his formidable adaptability having fully accustomed him to his current lifestyle. Yet he still somewhat reminisced about that world where every night was brightly lit, every corner's lights intertwined and even overshadowed the stars in the sky, but that was already in the past. He suddenly thought of a topic he had once seen: if an animal's body housed a human soul, should it be considered an animal or a human? In Karon's eyes, this topic wasn't really worth agonizing over. Whether animal's body or human's body, he is still himself, both human and dragon. After a long while, he suddenly sighed and closed his eyes. In a world without electronic entertainment and animated nightlife, time passed incredibly slowly. Karon had good reason to suspect that the so-called juvenile dragons spent most of their time sleeping, not because they needed to sleep to grow, but because they were bored. After all, giant dragons only need to enter sleep to transcend ages, digest inheritance, and awaken the talents in their bloodline, but otherwise are free to roam and grow like humans. Juvenile dragons, lacking enough self-preservation ability, couldn't wander like adult giant dragons and could only sleep to pass this long growth period. But there is something Karon is very satisfied with: he no longer has to wake up early. Every day, he gets to sleep well past the third pole. Today, as usual, Karon lazily crawled out of his nest only after sleeping enough, squinting his eyes to gaze at the sun hanging high long ago. Then Karon swaggered, planning to wander around the forest outside the dragon nest. He had been cooped up in the dragon nest for a while, almost suffocating, so going out to explore might also offer him some new opportunities. The gorge was quiet now. The juvenile dragons were apparently each sleeping in their caves. They only became active in the evening when Axi came to feed them. Only 2 white dragons basked by the pond, and upon seeing Karon wanting to go out, Gomot hastily blocked him. "Karon, Axi did advise us against going out recklessly. Though we are giant dragons, there are still many beasts that can harm us now, and the dense jungle can obscure giant dragons' vision. Axi also cannot guarantee absolute safety in the forest." "No problem, I'll just explore near the dragon nest, won't go far, this area should be safe." Karon smiled. Even though Blue Dragon Carlet stayed in the nest without casually emitting dragon power, when giant dragons build their nests, this place was long forbidden to other powerful creatures, leaving only weak animals as usual. Another white dragon, Kamid, rose. "Karon, I'll go with you." Kamid's frail body seemed somewhat malnourished before Karon. "Maybe I can still be of help." The 2 dragons walked out of the gorge one after another, with the ineffective reprimand of White Dragon Gomot, who continued to lie down and sunbathe. Once entering the forest, Karon felt a notable temperature difference. Trees averaging several people embracing in girth, standing dozens of meters tall, with lush branches and foliage, massive crowns blocking sunlight, also reducing visibility compared to the outside. The white dragons, who enjoyed colder areas, revealed relaxed expressions. The slightly chilly forest atmosphere felt like a cooling breeze to them. The 2 juvenile dragons cautiously avoided the direction of the water flow, moving towards the forest, stepping on thick layers of fallen leaves, turning over fertile black soil underneath. By the mountainside, the forest was extremely quiet. Even small animals were rarely seen. Only occasionally did a flying bird startle away from above the trees by White Dragon Kamid's not yet masterful dragon power. After walking a few miles, a plump, tender white worm was suddenly startled and emerged from the decaying soil. Kamid lowered his head, mimicking a lizard catching mosquitoes, skillfully curling the worm with his tongue, biting it with a splash of white juice. Seeing the white dragon's face of enjoyment, Karon smacked the white dragon's head with his claw. "Useless, eating even these worms. Then he also couldn't help but lick his lips and asked, "How does it taste?" "Hee hee, tasty." Kamet foolishly nodded. "Great." Karon extended his claws, squatted, and started digging on the ground with the white dragon. He lacked the so-called giant dragon pride, eating wasn't disgraceful. The worms, liking to hide under rotten leaf layers, met misfortune today. Having lived long in dense forests with few predators, they grew both white and fat. Each worm was palm length, biting them sprayed juice, like soup dumplings he'd eaten before, with a great texture. The two dragons eat joyfully. "Yoahoo, the giant dragon who likes eating bugs." A burst of laughter came from the forest, drawing near. Karon, who was indulging in digging with his bottom upturned, felt a shadow sweep overhead at the corner of his eye, and instinctively turned his head to look. With his excellent motion capture ability, he saw a tiny creature with butterfly-like sheer wings flying by, trailing behind it a meteor-like tail of sparkling stardust like falling rain. White Dragon Kamet also heard the commotion and looked around alertly. This creature was evidently curious about giant dragon behaviors, yet somewhat timid and shy, quickly flying to hide behind a tree branch, exposing its upper body, the eyes turning with curiosity. Only then did Karon get a good look at this creature's appearance. About 1 foot tall, this creature emitted a glow like a full moon. 2 pairs of delicate butterfly-like wings adorned its back, and it wore a petal-short skirt with a hollowed abdomen, revealing a delicate navel. An acorn hat on its head, the Pick Elf maiden's slightly round face was full of curiosity. "Forest elf." A look of surprise covered Karon's dragon face as he called out. "The giant dragon got it wrong, Riven isn't a forest elf, Riven is a Pick Elf." Pick Fairy Riven seemed dissatisfied at being called a forest elf, flying out from behind the branch. A pair of bare, tender white little feet stepped on the moss-covered branches, with rounded little hands patting its chest that the petal skirt totally failed to cover. Karon's eyes turned, recalling this magical creature, female Pick Elves also being called magic fairies, possessing considerable magic ability with a natural affinity for plants, making them excellent plantation masters in Karon's view. The stardust trailing behind Pick Elves, like a flame tail, is called elf dust, and even a small amount can grant the ability to fly, as well as confuse and lull enemies into sleep. It's a natural magic ability phenomenon. Additionally, they possess natural invisibility, rarely appearing if they don't wish to be seen, proving that this elf is here with goodwill. Moreover, Pick Elves love seeking fun and making friends everywhere. As long as no species harbors malice towards them, they are very amicable. Thus, Karon used his dragon claw to lift a bug towards the elf in the tree with a friendly smile, saying, "Well then, Pick Fairy Riven, would you like to have one?" "Not quite," Riven said as her delicate little face wrinkled at the sight of the bug almost a third of her size constantly squirming. "This thing is too scary, Riven doesn't eat this." "All right," Karon sighed in mock disappointment, "seems I can't entertain my newly met friend. Do you want to be friends with Riven?" The Pick Fairy's previously wrinkled little face soon brightened with joy, bouncing on the tree branch. After a while, she stopped, leaning forward with hands clasped behind, speaking softly, "But Riven doesn't know your name yet. Just call me Karon." The Red Dragon calculated internally, perhaps he could ally the Pick Elf race as a beloved. Strength isn't the most crucial aspect in his eyes, as no beloved can ever be stronger than himself. They need to be useful, the strength is transient but the beauty is a lifetime affair. As a visitor from Otherworld, he saw things more comprehensively, and these Pick Elves with notable magic abilities and natural plant affinity could play a significant role in agricultural production. If used for combat, the path would be misguided. Imagining Riven and her kin wielding little shovels passionately in the future, a wicked pleasure sparked within the Red Dragon's heart. "I'm Kamet." The White Dragon, who had been silent following behind, received Karon's eye gesture and spoke out proactively. "Karon, that's great, and Kamet too, we're friends from now on." The delighted Pick Elf flapped her wings flying down from the tree, stopping in front of Karon, extending her tender white arms, her round glossy black eyes staring at Karon. Red Dragon knowingly extended a claw for Riven to hold. Yes, we'll be lifelong good friends. Red Dragon maliciously emphasized the words, exposing a grin of sharp white teeth. Yoahoo, then I can go back and show off to the other pick elves that I've made a very strong giant dragon friend today. Riven's tiny silhouette joyfully spun circles beside Karon, her butterfly wings buzzing. By the way, I know where there are delicious things in the forest, come with me Karon, and Kamid too, it'll be my treat for my new friends. Source, webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 8, Riven's Gift. Chapter 8, Riven's Gift. Phew, Karon, can't you two speed up a bit? We're almost at my pasture's bee swarm territory. Little elf Riven cheerfully danced in the air ahead, boasting as she introduced. This is a method I learned from a giant tree druid passing through the forest. My pasture's bee swarm harvests the sweetest nectar daily, and their honey is praised as the world's finest dessert by merchants from far-off human empire. Karon, listening to the little elf's boasting, huffed along behind with the white dragon. Although the dragons weren't yet so large as to struggle moving through the towering trees of the forest. But Riven's leading flight path was hardly straightforward, she liked to swoop up and down, turn left and right, leaving Karon a bit confused. Yet, he astutely picked up on the little elf's emphasis, merchants from the distant human empire. In a place without networks or newspapers, encountering merchants was the best way for him to learn about the world. Each merchant was a walking encyclopedia of sorts. Moreover, merchants meant trade, and they didn't care if you were a giant dragon or a demon. As long as there was profit, they would trade with you. In theory, merchants were the ones who viewed all creatures equally. So Karon curiously asked, how do merchants get here? The road to this place isn't easy. His ancestral bloodline hadn't lived in this place, so his inheritance didn't carry knowledge about it. In conversations with Axie, he learned that this area was far from various centers of civilization, virtually a wilderness of civilization. To the south lay vast forest wastelands, to the north endless grassland steppes. These areas invariably housed many monsters, and fierce beasts were everywhere, along with numerous enchanting magical creatures. These were tremendous dangers to humans. Both Axie and Carlet were considered outsiders, having nested in this mountain area for a short time. The scope of their surroundings explored was likely less than that of the native Pick Elf Riven, which was one reason Karon aimed to befriend Pick Fairy Riven. Those merchants arrived by ship, not only humans but also some petite and non-smelly goblin merchants. Riven, seeing Karon's interest, flew back and stood on the red dragon's outstretched claw, guiding while explaining. From here, walk far eastward, it's roughly a 2-day flight for me. There's a gulf there where merchants dock their ships. Many daring humans accompany them into the forest seeking trade with pick elves. However, it always takes a long time for the merchants to arrive, maybe it's because it's too far away. Karon nodded thoughtfully, that was the merchant's way. As long as profits awaited, a bit of danger counted for little. He even recalled from his inherited memories that many allied caravans would cross the world, entering the abyss to trade with demons, saying they were greedier than dragons. Hey, the pick elf became anxious seeing the red dragon's intrigued expression, waving her plump little hands furiously in front of Karon's big eyes, reminding. Karon, you can't sneak over there, that gulf belongs to the terrifying ogre tribe. That powerful ogre tribe not only has a dreadful ogre king capable of easily slaying young giant dragons but also formidable ogre mages and mysterious ogre giant demons. They love enslaving other creatures, and I don't want to lose a friend I've just met. Alright, a friend's advice is worth considering. Karon nodded, sincerely agreeing with the little one before him. Initially hearing of a trade gulf did tempt him, such a place was a money-making gold mine. But he was still too young for now. Dragon groups wasn't in his hands to change, this would be planned for later. Is this your pastured bee swarm? It looks quite bustling. Karon stopped walking, tilting his head to look ahead. Under a palm tree thick enough for several people to wrap their arms around, the dense bee swarm buzzed about. These bees, resembling honeybees, were each thumb-sized, dispersing like a cloud, buzzing throughout the forest. A 3-meter-tall black bear padded its way towards a tree hole atop the tree. It thrust its massive head into the tree hole, pawing honey to shove into its mouth with one hand, occasionally swatting away stinging bees with the other. When stung sharply, it would bellow but refused to withdraw its head, occasionally grunting and smacking its lips, clearly relying on its thick skin, bearing the bee swarm's pain to eat its fill. Though this black bear hadn't quite entered the ranks of fierce beasts, standing on tiptoe made it akin to a single-story building. Their size, similar to the standing Karon, wasn't a synonym for weakness in the eyes of the two young dragons. And seeing this, Riven angrily shouted and flew over, the elf dust trailing behind her, creating shadows. "That darn big black bear is stealing my honey again, how infuriating!" The small body of the pig fairy halted abruptly above the bear, shrieking as she muttered a spell, scattering the stardust like elf dust behind her. The magic power enveloped the black bear, and with a snap, the black bear turned into a little lamb and fell to the ground, its two dazed cross-shaped pupils staring at the sky as if it hadn't realized what had happened yet. "Quick, help me hold down this big bear," little elf Riven called out while busy calming the agitated bee swarm, leading them into the tree hole to inspect the damage, while also summoning two dragons. She was still young, with magical power that couldn't last long, and it wouldn't be much longer before this bewildered goat turned back. Karon and the white dragon stepped forward, each pinning down half of its body. Sure enough, after a few breaths, the magic wore off, and the goat reverted to the black bear, its nose swollen and bruised by the bee stings. Though this black bear was similar in size to Karon, in the grip of the two young dragons, it dared not move and trembled under the suppression of dragon power, its small eyes full of terror. "Luckily, this big bear didn't scare my little darlings," Riven said as she emerged from the tree hole after a while, the anger on her little face completely gone, struggling to carry a large flower basket in her hand. This basket was clearly woven using magic power, the flower vines used in the weaving were fresh, the tender green leaves still carried the aura of magic. The carefully woven bottom of the basket was lined with some large, broad leaves, filled to the brim with honey. Riven hung the basket on the red dragon's claw, embarrassedly raising her little face. "Karon, I have to check on the other beehives, I'll come to play with you again when I have the time." The pig fairy, after getting Karon's consent, hurriedly left without paying attention to the bear-turned captive. Karon and Kamet exchanged a glance, and decisively bit the black bear to death. But Karon didn't plan to eat in the forest, he wanted to bring the free prey back with the white dragon. This was a small idea he wanted to teach the young dragons, that some things could be shared, like foods grilled with a honey glaze. "Hey, Kamet, do you know the way back?" "Karon, I think you're much smarter than me." "All right." Karon had no choice but to hang the small flower basket on his tail and lower his head to sniff around. Luckily, the sense of smell of a giant dragon was sharp enough, not worse than that of a hound. Like mountain guarding hounds, the two dragons sniffed around the forest for a long time before dragging the prey, which was quite large even for young dragons, back along the original path to the valley. Karon ignored the white dragon Gomot who came up beside him, and Kamet, feeling superior, also ignored his own brother. Karon skillfully gutted the organs from the black bear's body, then instructed Kamet to skin the prey and roll the gutted body in the pond water a few times until it was clean. Finally, he dragged several dry logs from the mountaintop, skewered the prey, placed it over the fire, and started his first small barbecue since coming to this world. Though he was a giant dragon and could adapt to any flavor of food, eating raw food was just because of the dragon's formidable adaptability and laziness, not that the dragons particularly liked it. Dragons were not witless beasts, savoring delicious food was also one of the dragon's trademarks. So when the food on the fire began to emit the unique aroma of barbecue, a circle of young dragons had already gathered eagerly around the fire, all the dragon cubs watching intently as the food sizzled, releasing fat juices from the roasting. Watching Kamid, who was proudly and diligently turning the wooden spit with a mysterious sense of pride, the white dragon Gomot inexplicably regretted. Maybe I should have joined Karon out there, that way, I could have gotten a big piece of food. This thought intensified as Karon drizzled honey over the grilled food, particularly when he noticed the young blue dragon Axie, who normally disdained sitting with the young dragons, had somehow quietly mingled among the waiting dragon group, with a shimmer at the corner of his mouth. Karon did not yield his leading position due to Axie's arrival, he still took charge of distributing the food. This time, he kept the delicious ribs for himself before dividing the food piece by piece. Axie received a tasty and chewy piece from the chest and belly, much to the blue dragon's satisfaction. Kamid, who followed him outside, was rewarded with the previously retained organs and the fatty belly, which was a deserved reward for Kamid's hard work. There was no need to pay much attention to the remaining young dragons. Karon just roughly divided the grilled food into several portions and started enjoying the simple delicacy in front of him. Seems I need to pay attention to those merchants the Pick Fairy mentioned, you can buy many useful things from them. Spices as a flavor enhancer are indispensable. Karon smacked his lips, thinking it tasted even better this way, although it didn't quite fit his previous habits. After all, smacking your lips while eating looked bad, but now he was just a dragon and didn't need to care about others' opinions. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 9, The Pick Elf's Little Horns. Chapter 9, The Pick Elf's Little Horns. Hey, keep it up, Karon. You're the best. Oh, Das, you too, don't get knocked down by Karon again. The Pick Elf flapped her wings, flying excitedly around the marked court, cheering loudly wherever Karon ran. Recently, Riven often comes over to visit her new friends and has already gotten familiar with Karon and these juvenile dragons. To her, staying here is way more fun than listening to the Pick Elves brag all day. Of course, she ignores the fact that recently, the one boasting the most within the tribe is herself. As the only creature currently able to enter the dragon nest without being a giant dragon, the little elf now has quite a high status among the younger generation of her tribe. Riven likes spending time with Karon because she feels Karon is not like the stereotypically evil five-colored giant dragons, but more like the occasional visiting humans in the forest. Karon is more humane. In simple terms, Karon treats her friend equally, like a human, rather than looking down on all creatures like other giant dragons with arrogant equality. Kamid is very reserved but has the pride of a giant dragon. He won't hold the Pick Elf in high regard just because of Karon's attitude. Moreover, among the juvenile dragons, there is a green dragon who likes to feast on various elves and little elves, and every time Antagena looks at Riven, it always feels like she sees prey. Fortunately, staying beside Karon gives a sense of security, otherwise little elf Riven wouldn't dare come to the dragon nest. Only the rather steady blue dragon Das's attitude isn't as obvious as the other giant dragons, so his relationship with the little elf is more familiar. Bang! Karon knocked over blue dragon Das, landing on all fours, and the ball pressed under his paw rolled forward. Red dragon Kleena chased forward to grab the ball, seeing black dragon Rosani from Karon's team rushing to snatch the ball, immediately flicking it to the green dragon beside him. Green dragon Antagena had no intention of making contact with white dragon Kamid who came to defend beside her, but instead pretended to charge while kicking the ball out, right through Kamid's legs, to white dragon Gomot originally trailing in the back. But at this moment, Gomot was at the forefront of the attack, and the white dragon easily sent the ball into the goal, shouting, "Woo, we won! 4 against 3, they still narrowly won the match. So now it's time to enjoy the victory. What's important is that giant dragons love the feeling of winning. This isn't fair, we have one less dragon." The competitive black dragon Rosani was still panting a bit. The confrontation between giant dragons in this match was quite exhausting, though giant dragons don't sweat physiological fluids, only a faint mist rises on the surface of their bodies. Who says you don't have Karon as an ally with super specification? Blue Dragon Das walked over slowly. He and Kleena have been the main force opposing Karon head-on in the field, and now they're no better than Rosani, with white steam prominently spewing from their nostrils. Green Dragon Antagena, who had been slacking off in the match, came forward, her pair of green eyes like transparent gemstones looking at the red dragon as she said, "Yeah, Karon is stronger than all our juvenile dragons, it's only fair that we're +1 dragon." Recently, the green dragon has consciously begun to curry favor with the red dragon standing especially strong within the dragon group. It's probably the nature of the green dragon species, they like to depend on strong ones from the same kind, and if there's a chance to manipulate it, even better. Humph! Young female dragon Kleena snorted through her nostrils. It's not that she's dissatisfied with Karon earning the title of the strongest among juvenile dragons, she just feels a bit irked seeing Antagena praise Karon even if, usually, their interactions are harmonious. Karon paid no mind to the juvenile dragon's disputes. When there are many, differing opinions are inevitable, regardless of the species. He walked cheerfully toward the little elf waiting on the sidelines, not because of Riven's presence, but because he discovered through the exercise that his control over his body did indeed improve, and his physical response capability was honed as well. It seems not only humans, but giant dragons also need regular exercise. "Let's go, Riven," the red dragon nodded to the little elf indicating she could sit on his shoulder. "I'm feeling quite hungry today, I could eat a whole mountain deer." The red dragon chatted with the little elf, signaling white dragon Kamid to follow his steps with his eyes. Karon recently discovered another use for little elves, which is to hunt for him. The invisible Riven only needs to quietly approach the chosen prey and then use magic to put them into slumber. When the prey lacks the ability to escape, Karon easily takes care of it and then happily prepares a special meal for himself. This is much more convenient than the red dragon hunting for himself. The scales of a juvenile dragon are too conspicuous, making them famously noticeable. Weak creatures run away at the sight of him, and even powerful creatures can't defeat him. His hunting abilities aren't as good as those of the fierce beasts, let alone the pick elf who has a 100% success rate. Fortunately, pick elves aren't like some vegetarian elves. Riven also enjoys eating meat, especially after tasting Karon's barbecue. The barbecue isn't particularly special, pick elves can also make it, but Karon is a red dragon. His fire control ability is naturally gifted for grilling, achieving a crispy exterior and tender interior, with an even charred flavor as a basic skill. The little elf who tasted its sweetness even proactively offered to help the red dragon hunt, with the price being a leg, regardless of what the prey is. Yes, Riven likes to gnaw on a leg, which she learned from human merchants. She always felt that gnawing on a large leg would taste better, especially if she had a drink to go with it. Unfortunately, pick elves don't know how to brew alcohol. As for Karon, he's a Dumbo dragon who only knows how to eat and waits for the pick elves to feed him. Chatting with Riven aimlessly, Karon, walking through the forest, even had the feeling of being kept, with the cost being just a small barbecue meal. This made Karon's dragon face flush a bit, but fortunately, he always kept the secret safe with white dragon Kamid. Other dragons didn't notice this undignified situation for a dragon. However, thanks to Riven's feeding, Karon has felt his development speeding up in the past 2 months, and he's now already 4 meters long. With his talent for super limit state growth, Karon's powerful digestive ability as a giant dragon has improved even further, requiring twice the amount of food as other juvenile dragons, something Axe's rationed feeding couldn't satisfy. If it weren't for Riven, Karon would either risk hunting for himself or simply use his robust dragon stomach to digest Earth. Thus, Karon had a more friendly attitude towards the little elf who became more helpful. "Wow, Karon, your horns are so beautiful." Riven gazed longingly at the sturdy pair of horns on the red dragon's head, her little hands seemed restless, truly wanting to touch those dragon horns with spiraling patterns. Weak ones admire the strong, and this is true for the pick elf species as well. They enjoy making friends, hoping to gain the friendship of the strong. In Riven's eyes, the dragon horns on the red dragon represent the power and majesty of the giant dragon, something she knows she can't possess, making her envy even more intense. With the aesthetic standard of valuing strength, the horns of the giant dragon are indeed filled with the beauty of power and savagery. Karon turned his head, his large dragon eyes glaring at Riven, with a look that clearly said, "If you dare to touch, I dare to bite." Of course, Karon didn't care about the dragon horns representing a giant dragon's dignity being untouchable, but he wouldn't show it. Even among friends, there needs to be a sense of boundaries. I can be nice to you, but you can't overstep the limits. Well, I just really admire your dragon horns. Riven's restless hands retracted, her round little face looking a bit dejected. Why don't pick elves have horns on their heads? I wish I had a pair of beautiful little horns. The red dragon was both amused and bemused by the little elf's words. He's seen hand enthusiasts and foot enthusiasts before, but never a horn enthusiast. Karon stopped, gestured for Riven to stand in front of him with his left claw, then carefully pinched off 2 wild flowers at his feet with 2 claws and placed them on Riven's acorn hat, one on each side. He then clapped his hands and smiled casually, "There, now Riven, you have your own pair of horns." Riven gingerly touched the 2 fragile flower stems adorned with a few green leaves on her head. The elf dust behind her sprinkled lightly, drawing the dew from nearby trees and plants with magical power, slowly gathering it into a small, ever-shifting mirror. The pick elf looked at herself in the mirror, seemingly appearing quite different, as a blush spread rapidly across Riven's previously droopy face, making her delicate features radiant with vivacity. With a whoop, she held onto the flowers on her head and joyfully flew up and down around the red dragon. After several such loops, she suddenly seemed to remember something, rapidly flying away, with the elf dust trailing behind her, morphing into a tail flame, leaving behind her joyful shouts. "Karon, come quickly, I found your favorite mountain deer, and there's a whole herd of them. I'll pick out the 2 plumpest ones for you." Karon gave a mysterious look to the white dragon and then followed along unhurriedly. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 10, The Dragon Group's First Hunt. Chapter 10, The Dragon Group's First Hunt. Karon lazily lay in his own nest. During this time, he underwent a brief sleep lasting a month, and his body, under the growth talent of the super-limit state, has reached over 4 meters. This physique has far surpassed the normal size of a 5-color dragon hatchling of the same age. It's undeniable that Riven's feeding is critical. Now, Karon can no longer be satisfied with the amount of food Axie provides regularly every day. His appetite under the growth talent of the super limit state is much larger than that of a normal hatchling, and his digestive ability is terrifying. He needs to consume at least twice his body weight in food daily to support his growth and daily activities. Without adequate food supply, his growth would slow, and he would have to reduce daily activities. Then, like some beasts, he'd lazily lie on the ground, reducing energy consumption. Relying solely on Riven's feeding is not a good strategy. Riven doesn't come every day, and the little elf is not a subordinate creature to the giant dragon, needing to be attached at all times. Given this situation, one must find his own ways to prevent delaying growth. Karon once considered learning some magic from Riven, whose magic is undoubtedly convenient for hunting. However, all of pick elf abilities derive from innate elf dust, just like how giant dragons rely on their own evil dragon blood, resembling bloodline mage. These skills can't be acquired by learning. In the investigation process, Karon discovered that although giant dragons are naturally powerful magical creatures, they surprisingly lack a magic core. Or perhaps, the magic core is the evil dragon bloodline itself within the giant dragon, possibly the same for bloodline mage-type casters. The evil dragon bloodline has been absorbing and accumulating magic power for the growth of the giant dragon since its birth. Over time, the evil dragon bloodline and magic flow through every blood vessel, with the heart as the transfer and regulation point of the body's magic power. This makes the giant dragon's magic as fast and swift as a warlock, but the dragon's spells need to awaken through continuous sleep, and the awakened spells are not many. Some unfortunate ones may awaken only a few spells throughout their dragon life, including spells like item positioning skill, considered somewhat redundant, which is undoubtedly a great waste of the giant dragon's powerful magic ability. To most giant dragons, their naturally powerful bodies and sharp claws are sufficiently strong, not to mention the dragon breath that is stronger than most magic. As they age, giant dragons naturally grow stronger. Simply sleeping makes them stronger without the need to torment themselves. Moreover, the turbulent evil dragon blood flowing through the five-colored giant dragons constantly influences them, making it hard for them to calmly meditate and absorb magic, let alone learn spells. Karon is different. He possesses human-like autonomous consciousness and clear intellect to suppress the influence of the evil dragon blood, allowing him to calmly learn spell knowledge. Currently, the evil dragon blood only distracts him like humans do occasionally. Karon knows that although giant dragons are formidable beings, there exist creatures stronger than giant dragons, some of which prey on them as legendary species. Even humans, considered weak from a giant dragon's perspective, often target them as dragon hunters, seeing dragon slaying as glory, driven by the motivation of dragon treasures. As a red dragon and a man, he enjoys using his bare body and strength to crush enemies and conquer opponents. But Karon, with an innate fear of insufficient firepower in his soul, feels the need to have more backup strategies, with magic obviously being a form of strength. Moreover, from the newly digested inheritance, Karon learned that legendary mages can create their own half-plane in the void, possessing such knowledge and ability. Even if a mage dies, the half-plane won't fall into enemy hands unless its coordinates are exposed, only falling into the void until its demise. This greatly tempts Karon. Perhaps the strong magical creature giant dragon doesn't need legendary achievement to create its own half-plane. It's the safest treasure vault and habitat for any giant dragon, like a stable safety house. This security lacking Karon immediately decides to embark on the path of good learning. Karon believes he should find an opportunity to discuss this with Axi, see if Axi possesses such knowledge. But for now, the priority is filling his stomach. The pond in the canyon is half frozen, forming a large ice surface, dominated by two white dragons as an open-air nest, which makes Black Dragon Rosani envious, causing him to hover around the pond daily. Then, Rosani is driven away by the white dragon brothers unless he accompanies other hatchlings coming for a drink. The scene Karon sees upon emerging from his cave is a daily occurrence in the canyon. The white dragon brothers seem on the verge of slumber, so they lazily spread out like huskies on the ice after chasing away the black dragon. Upon seeing Karon approaching, they get up, and the irreverent Gomot courteously greets his idol from the heart. "You're awake, Karon, you've grown stronger again." The black dragon Rosani takes the chance to come over and greet Karon too. Karon nods, glancing around, seeing most awake hatchlings here, so he asks, "I'm going hunting in the forest. Do you want to join?" Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 11-10, Dragon Group's First Hunt, Part 2. Chapter 11, Chapter 10, Dragon Group's First Hunt, Part 2. The reason he asked the juvenile dragon for its opinion is that giant dragon hatchlings typically only venture out to explore the surroundings of the dragon nest during their juvenile stage, when they already have some ability to protect themselves. Juvenile dragons usually just sleep and play in the dragon nest. Although he wanted to optionally take the juveniles out for hunting to train the dragon group's teamwork, he still needed to respect the dragon's wishes. Since Karon, the young dragoness Kleena, and blue dragon Das had successively entered a deep sleep, the black dragon and white dragon could no longer play games and were already bored. Thus, it was decided to go hunting in the forest with the red dragon, and the robust, uncharacteristically juvenile Karon gave them considerable confidence and security. Green dragon Antagena, nestled in the mountain cave, always curious and yearning for the forest like no other juvenile dragon, poked her head out upon hearing the juvenile's decision and shouted, Take me along, Karon. The forest is my domain, I will be of assistance. Karon nodded in agreement, leading the dragon group flying towards the forest outside the gorge. The scales of the juveniles were too conspicuous, making them easy targets for prey. The tall and dense forest could shield the prey's view but couldn't block the sharp eyes of the giant dragon. The forest was well suited as a hunting ground for the juveniles. Karon wasn't leaving the dragon nest for the first time. With the guidance of little elf Riven, who acted as the pathfinder, he was quite familiar with the nearby forest. He decided to hunt only within a range of a few dozen miles around the dragon nest, which is considered very safe. Extremely powerful ferocious beasts and high-level creatures were either driven away or killed by Blue Dragon Axi, and if anything happened that he couldn't resist, a loud cry for help would quickly garner support from the great dragon resting in the nest. The juvenile dragons spread their wings in the sky, searching onward in a triangular pattern. Along the way, the juvenile sounds of ghostly wails were abundant, clearly excited by the first hunt and rare outing of the dragon group, and Karon had no intention of stopping them. He also wanted to howl a few times. The forest, unsuitable for great dragon hunting, was bustling with beasts, especially because of the chaos caused either by the juveniles' howls or the unrestrained impact of dragon power on the forest. Deer scattered in panic, wolves gave up their hunt, terrified by the noises, birds settled on trees alarmed and dispersed, sloths fell from the high branches, and bears hurriedly dove into the caves. Lowering his head to seek a target, Karon even saw a few rabbits that had stunned themselves by crashing into trees. But these weren't Karon's targets, he was meticulously looking for his prey. A black wild boar over 6 meters long was grunting, using its thick and long tusks to dig out root vegetables from the ground, with its white beard like hairs dirted by the soil and its giant body covered in coarse black tangled fur. A thick mud armor, formed by mud mixed with resin, covered its body. This was a wild boar king that had entered the ranks of ferocious beasts. The herd under the leadership of this wild boar king was about 200 strong, leisurely feeding around the boar king. The pigs were completely unwary while feeding, for their leader was the mightiest creature in this low-lying hill area, with all intruding enemies being pierced by the wild boar king's massive tusks and then shared among the herd. A gust of wind blew by, bringing a dangerous scent that made the earth-digging wild boar king suspiciously raise its head, its small eyes beginning to search for the source of the danger. The next moment, the dangerous scent descended from the sky. Juvenile dragons formed a circular formation, wings flapping sluggishly, hovering 3 feet above the ground. The hunting instinct made all juvenile dragons lock their gaze on the herd's leader. Before the dragon group could act, the danger-aware wild boar king urgently howled, evading the robust red dragon and driving the herd towards what appeared to be the weakest black dragon, while the wild boar king, protected by the herd, began a frenzied charge. The momentum of the pig herd's advance startled the black dragon, who quickly ascended, allowing the herd to pass, while simultaneously spewing a mouthful of acid at the massive wild boar king. The weak acid from the juvenile dragon hit the wild boar king's thick mud armor, only eliciting a slight sizzling sound, without breaking the mud armor. Seeing this, Karon roared furiously, took off, and chased toward the wild boar king within the herd. The usually slow-reacting white dragon Kamid suddenly lunged from mid-air, sharp dragon claws sweeping past, slicing through the wild boar king's hind leg, piercing the mud armor and leaving a scar on the wild boar king's thigh, a thin stream of blood oozing from the wound. But that injury was insignificant to the massive wild boar king, with the ferocious beast's awakened spell-like thick mud armor shielding much damage, so it kept its head down and charged forward heedlessly. Green Jade Dragon Antagena arrived just in time, urging her innate abilities, and vines clinging to trees suddenly twisted into tendrils, actively entwining the wild boar king's running hooves. Yet the wild boar king's power was something even Karon dared not confront directly. It wouldn't be subdued by a few vines, only causing a slight stumble. White Dragon Gomot was a beat slower than the Green Dragon. He managed to spray dragon breath, the cold breath unable to freeze the beast's running pace but solidifying into a thin layer of ice beneath the wild boar king's feet, causing the beast's forelegs to slip and kneel to the ground. Then Karon's attack arrived, with strong muscles exerting force, sharp dragon claws sweeping past, effortlessly piercing the mud armor, opening a wound on the wild boar king's back, exposing the white spine wrapped in pink muscle. Then he tore a piece of flesh, kicked on the wailingly crawling wild boar king attempting to flee again to gain momentum and flew up. The black dragon, now aware, promptly spat poison at the wild boar king's eye, blinding one of them. The panic-stricken wild boar king darted left and right, but the coordination between the juvenile dragons gradually became harmonious, with ice and vines hindering its escape pace. Karon and Kamid's sharp claws continually bled and shredded its flesh, while the black dragon frantically flapped its wings, attempting to fly up front and spew acid again. Before it could run a few miles away, bang, the exhausted wild boar king crashed down unable to get up anymore, only having the strength to grunt lying on the ground. Landing, Karon approached the ferocious wild boar king, biting through its neck, and the hot blood flowed into Karon's hungry stomach, instilling a sense of satisfaction in him. Karon suppressed his urge to feed, using sharp dragon claws to open up the giant beast's abdomen, pulled out the still slowly beating heart, and handed it to White Dragon Kamid, the best reward for Kamid's bravery. Kamid happily growled, taking a bite of the gigantic heart. Only then did Karon summon the juvenile dragons to come forward and share the massive creature, while he occupied the abdominal area and began eating. Now was the time for the dragon group to relish their prey. The juvenile dragon's feast had commenced. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 12-11, Absolute Control. Chapter 12, Chapter 11, Absolute Control. Karon's lair was very clean. Due to the arrival of the red dragon, the originally dark and damp mountain belly had become dry and warm, with bones piled in some corners for grinding teeth. From the bone debris-covered corners grew a small number of dragon blood red flame grass. This magical herb, crystal clear like red jade, nurtured from the blood stains left by the red dragon's teeth grinding and scale shedding. Emitting a warm glow all over, it was also one of the sources of the increased temperature in the cave. This was part of the giant dragon's nest effect. The longer dragons stayed in one place, the greater the impact they had on the surrounding environment and ecology. The nest effect of legendary giant dragons could easily alter a location's terrain and climatic conditions, affecting all creatures living near the dragon nest. Under the radiation of the legendary dragon's power and bloodline, many half-dragon species could even be born near the dragon nest. Many beasts and monsters would also mutate into powerful creatures with corresponding giant dragon characteristics, becoming one of the sources of many dragons' beloved. However, Karon was still just a juvenile dragon, and the nest effect's influence was limited to his own cave. After discovering this spontaneous spreading influence he carried, Karon, who was somewhat obsessive about control, had been attempting to see if he could actively manage the emission of these subtle forces, but so far with little success. "Karon, Karon, can I come in?" Kamid peeked and called from outside Karon's lair. A dragon's lair is an extremely important secret space for them, and entering another dragon's lair casually would be seen as a provocation. Even Kamid, who often followed Karon to sneak off into the forest and was now quite familiar, dared not enter Karon's space randomly. "Come in, Kamid," the red dragon's voice echoed through the long passage, making White Dragon Kamid somewhat hesitant about the red dragon's lair. Nonetheless, he shook his head and walked into the passage. Having spent a lot of time with the red dragon, Kamid knew that usually, the red dragon was a dragon easy to get along with. Unlike Kleena, who was bad-tempered and likely to attack at any moment. Karon was honestly nesting in the cave, without hunting or joining the juvenile dragon's activities. The red dragon appeared especially quiet. And peace was detested by the eternally restless red dragon's bloodline, but this was also what Karon needed to do. "What is it, Kamid? You don't seem like the kind of dragon who comes to my lair just out of curiosity." The red dragon did not get up. The interaction among these juvenile dragons was very casual, so he lazily flicked his flexible tail, trying to see if he could form different seals as he spoke. White Dragon Kamid first observed the environment around the red dragon with a curious expression. Compared to other juvenile dragons who simply dug a hole, Karon's meticulously dug wide and tidy cave gave him the idea of imitation. It was indeed comfortable to live in such a lair. Then Kamid chuckled, "Karon, you know, Antagena got beaten up." Karon's face showed no expression as he lazily responded, "Is this really something you need to specifically come and tell me about? It's just juvenile dragons fighting, isn't it? Kamid, don't you also get beaten often?" It wasn't another dragon that beat her up. Antagena got quite a thrashing outside from 2 raven men. "She's really mad but too embarrassed to come over and find you herself." A hint of schadenfreude appeared on Kamid's tiny white-scaled face. Green dragons usually didn't hold the weakest of the 5-colored giant dragons, the white dragon, in high regard, so naturally, Kamid didn't think much of green dragons. Beaten by raven men. Karon's eyebrows, covered with tiny red scales, furrowed. Ever since Karon first led the juvenile dragons on a hunt, their activity range expanded beyond the confines of Dragon Nest Canyon, spreading into the forest. And it was during her wandering in the forest that Green Dragon Antagena encountered the raven men who nested in the woods, only to be beaten and driven away from their spot by a small tribe of raven men. This offspring of ancient beastmen and extraordinary magical creatures, known for their volatile nature and penchant for noise, could not be tamed, even having the wilderness's unmatched intelligence. "I should go have a look, these raven men have quite the nerve." Karon got up, calling the white dragon to walk out of the cave. The green dragon was currently by a pond in the canyon cleaning her wounds. The raven men had left several cut marks on her back, and many patches of finely woven, jade-like green dragon scales were torn off. The green dragon couldn't lick the wounds on her back and refused help from other dragons. The other juvenile dragons were active in the canyon, mocking the green dragon's situation, and even Kleena, who had a decent relationship with the green dragon, showed a schadenfreude-like attitude. Dragons were always like this, believing Antagena to be too weak and frail and laughing at her failure. This was why dragons, whether in groups or alone, retained a high degree of personal identity and independence, as they were inherently influenced by the inherited legacy of previous generations to some extent. "This is nothing to laugh at," the red dragon stood in the canyon, speaking seriously to the juvenile dragons. "The green dragon is part of our dragon group. Her failure also means the dragon group's interests are harmed, which is something we'll not tolerate. Come now, follow me, Antagena, I will take you to teach those blind raven men a lesson who don't recognize the masters of this land." The green dragon's beautiful eyes brightened, and she followed the turning red and white dragons. Kleena and the rest of the juvenile dragons exchanged looks and also dragged their tails along. The raven men's tree nest wasn't very far from the dragon's lair, dozens of miles to the west, but the dragon's activity had not yet extended that far. Since Axi was merely a young dragon, his attention was mostly on the relatively easy to observe and control prairie, while the rest of the juvenile dragons were still in a protected state. Oxy only wished for the juvenile dragons to remain somewhat stable within the lair and didn't have additional demands for them. The ravenmen's tree nest was constructed on a towering broadleaf tree, with sturdy branches below to allow each juvenile dragon to stand firmly. As Karon landed on the canopy's branches, the juvenile dragons descended one by one, surrounding the unsuspecting raven men. These raven men, covered in multicolored feathers with sharp beaks and claws, cawed and made an ear-piercing noise, but hesitated and dared not rashly attack. A single juvenile dragon they could boldly expel, but they hadn't expected the arrival of 7 juvenile dragons, a situation unforeseen by the raven men. Moreover, the belligerent Kleena was already seeking a hunting target, while the other juvenile dragons took on an offensive stance. As Karon said, the juvenile dragons were now united as one. The leading raven man's screechy voice rang out, "Young dragons, we have no intention to oppose you. We've been living here for decades, and before, we merely drove the green dragon away from our dwelling." Karon ignored the raven men. He was now a red dragon, a 5-colored evil dragon, not one of those benevolent metal dragons. Even benevolent metal dragons would have no room for negotiation when conquering destined territories. Antagena, go and break the wings of those raven men who harmed you, shred their claws too. Karon raised his head, at that moment resembling a famous painting, you go give them a smack. JPG. The green dragon was somewhat puzzled and asked, Karon, why not just finish off these raven men? Not only did the green dragon want to finish off these raven men, but the red dragon's blood within Karon was also itching to act, ready to unleash the flames of destruction without needing Karon's conscious thought. But Karon believed that even his body's instincts and urges needed to submit to his will, rather than swaying his thoughts. Every decision and action should stem from his thinking and will. He required absolute control of his will over his body. Thus, he contained the red dragon's destructive thoughts and dissipated the giant dragon's violent dragon fire. He glanced at the eager green dragon openly and righteously, Antagena, if the dragon group wants to reign over the land, it shouldn't bring wanton destruction. However, I wish that when you are strong enough, you visit here again, and if any creatures still defy a dragon, I'd like to see their heads among your trophies. Green Dragon Antagena narrowed her slender eyes, revealing a hint of dangerous glint. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 13-12, Another Fruitful Day. Chapter 13, Chapter 12, Another Fruitful Day. Karon lazily lay on the river bank, squinting, his long tail wrapped around the bones with a few threads of blood and flesh from his prey, dangling into the water. The tip of his tail occasionally twitched, luring a tiger-striped ferocious fish that was probing and pacing in deep water. But the tiger-striped ferocious fish cunningly eyed the enticing bait, refusing to bite, and even drove the originally dense schools of fish around far away. At this time, the red dragon had grown over the past 2 years to a length of 5 meters, becoming an undeniable red giant beast. Surpassing many juvenile dragons in size, only the strongest red dragons and metal dragons among giant dragons could compare with Karon in size. However, recently, the growth of the red dragon began to slow and stall. Evidently, even his mediocre evil dragon blood flowing under the gift of super-limit state growth was insufficient to support him growing stronger. He could think of several ways to solve this dilemma. The first is the impending sleep. To get through the crucial sleep period from juvenile dragon to young dragon, he would break the current limit and embrace a new growth period. The second way is to learn magic. Perhaps becoming a dragon mage could use the power of magic to break this dilemma. But Karon had already consulted Axi, and Axi had no knowledge in this area. Clearly, his predecessor was also like the majority of giant dragons, proud and lazy. Blue Dragon Carlette was also the same, but Carlette said she could teach Karon the giant dragon transformation skill. When a giant dragon grows into a young dragon, they naturally learn the giant dragon variation technique, which allows controlling the overall enlargement and reduction of the body. However, the transformation skill is changing into the form of other races, not engraved in every dragon inheritance. Karon decided that if he couldn't learn the transformation skill from his inheritance after this sleep, he would learn from Carlette. Perhaps he could use the transformation skill to find an opportunity to travel the human world and learn the knowledge he desired from human mages. The third way is the method obtained from his own inheritance, breaking the limit of his mediocre evil dragon blood, tracing back to the strong ancestral evil dragon bloodline, and the growth limit of a stronger bloodline would also be higher. In the inheritance, there are many figures of dragons breaking out their mediocre bloodlines, their bodies generally larger than other peers, and they have their unique power and appearance features. Among them, Karon is most impressed with a 100-meter-long red dragon, whose mountain-like gigantic body brings unmatched oppression and fear to enemies. Under those wings that block the sky, the world seems to cry and scream, praying for the red dragon to restrain its power and destructive flame. Unfortunately, he only knows such a method exists. There is no specific method in the inheritance to trace back the bloodline, thinking that the ancestral bloodline that left the dragon inheritance should be innate. And although it's closer to ancient bloodlines than his evil dragon blood, it's probably only limitedly strong. After all, he did not find the figure of his ancestral red dragon among those dragons with powerful names, like a little column, an inflating Karon maliciously speculated. The last method is the fundamental reliance that currently puts Karon far beyond other peers, existent within his mind, in the depth of consciousness, in dreams when he is in a trance where he could see that vortex. Earlier, the vortex the size of a human child's fist combined with his evil dragon blood formed the gift of super-limit growth now after only the last finger-sized bit of fundamental power. In these years, every time Karon goes to sleep, he carefully explores with consciousness, showing only the fundamental vortex finally revealing its true face. This is composed of countless tiny golden runes, difficult for consciousness to observe, forming a wonderfully structured shape like an ellipse, hidden within the vortex, floating up and down. It is exactly this cluster of runes that bestowed Karon abilities far exceeding same-age giant dragons, and Karon has a premonition that the gift of super-limit state growth he got is only the trivial ability of the mysterious rune. When Karon first completed the hunt for the ferocious wild boar king, he felt the soul of the wild boar king caused fluctuations in this power in his mind. Unfortunately, he did not have the knowledge or ability to absorb souls. The vortex passively absorbed a slight sort of power from the soul at a close distance without exerting any subjective initiative. And he vaguely sensed some danger when perceiving the power of the wild boar king's soul, perhaps warning him not to devour souls freely, or maybe the rune's fluctuations made him discover some hidden dangers. These are all unknown. But after years of exploration and research, Karon found that absorbing magic power could also enlarge that vortex in his mind. However, the rune needs not just pure magic power. Over the years, the giant dragon spontaneously absorbed a massive amount of magic power, which only increased a tiny amount of the dream vortex's mass. Clearly this vortex filters some sort of energy from magic power, maybe absorbing only some essence contained within magic power. There should be a common aspect in the essence of soul and magic power that causes rune fluctuations. Then what exactly is this common aspect? The red dragon has many speculations in mind, and some ideas are born consequently. But none of these methods can be immediately utilized right now. Thinking this, the red dragon sighed. The airman who had fished half a day without catching any fish immediately vented anger on the little female dragon Kleena, who was leaning, head resting beside him, tail swayed hard on her particularly tough head. "It's all your fault, Kleena, not restraining your dragon power well, causing me to not catch any fish again." Ever since the young female dragon found out the dragon group didn't take her on their first hunt, she was been upset. Every time Karon leaves the dragon nest, she would follow him. During this period, you could say that Karon was never far from Kleena, and Kleena was never far from Karon. Accustomed to this situation, Karon opened his eyes and laughed loudly at the red dragon. "Karon, if you want to eat fish, you can have Rosanny help you catch some in the water. Otherwise, with your fishing skills worse than the low-level monkeys in the forest, the giant dragon would starve to death." Furious and embarrassed, Karon immediately shouted, "Rosanny, Rosanny, come out quickly. Go block this river section upstream and downstream. Today I have to drain this segment of the river and get that cunning brutal fish." Rosanny, who was playing with fish several meters upstream, popped his head out of the water. He knew this was just Karon's joke. Karon usually doesn't look down on others just because he's strong and is easy to get along with for a dragon. So Black Dragon Rosanny ignored Red Dragon's unreasonable request, grinning while flicking his scales and rolling his eyes. "Forget it, Karon, or I could just catch that damned brutal fish and hang it on your tail. That would be faster than draining the water." Pfft! Karon stood up on all fours, spread his wide wings, and spat out a mouthful of sparks, swearing, "Kleena, go back and gather the dragon group. It's hunting time." This vast and fertile grassland may be deeply favored by the Icaria world. The numerous rivers crisscrossing the grassland never run dry, even in the driest seasons. The river, originating from a far-off point in the north, flows eternally through this grassland, nurturing the plants and the numerous beast tribes here. The dragon group flew forward in a triangular wedge formation in the sky, led by the largest juvenile red dragon, the leader of the juveniles, Karon Gogomola, serving as the formation's most formidable attack point. At the tips of the wings were the second largest dragons, a female red dragon Kleena, already over 3 meters and close to 4 meters in length, and blue dragon Das, who commands storms and lightning in the sky. Several other juvenile dragons, with bodies the size of adult horses and 3 meters long, connected the wingtips and the formation's apex, ready to aid the wings and front at any time. High above the juvenile dragon's formation, the 11-meter-long caretaker dragon Axi soared on open wings. Her pupils, capable of adjusting, had become vertical slits, her sharp eyes scanning ahead, searching for areas that might pose a danger to the juveniles. Ever since Karon consciously trained the juveniles' sense of teamwork and cooperative combat ability, each hunt would have the juveniles pouring out in full force from the dragon nest. This was partly to satisfy the juveniles' desire for combat and slaughter, and partly for the dragon group to take the opportunity to explore the environment surrounding their territory. As such, each juvenile hunt would venture further from the dragon nest, slightly beyond the nest's territorial range, slowly and methodically expanding their activity area. The dragon group flew over the familiar territory, setting their sights on a herd of over 300 wild horses. These wild horses were large, robust, and well-fed, with shiny coats suggesting they were well-fleshed. Moreover, the herd ran daily on the grassland, ensuring that their meat would be tough and chewy. The juvenile dragons began locking onto their targets, all aiming for the strongest stallions in the herd. This was due to Karon's influence. Karon generally didn't hunt females or the young, nor did he hunt near water sources. The juveniles knew this was called sustainable development, avoiding depleting resources in one go. The top-down influence was quick and noticeable. The juveniles still revered strength but were slowly getting accustomed to using intelligence. The juvenile formation began diving with Karon, the red dragon leader's wide and powerful wings breaking the wind in the front, the group's dive gaining speed. By the time the herd realized something was wrong and attempted to scatter, the dragon group's attack was upon them. The juvenile dragons swooped over the herd, their claws reaching for their targets. Karon's powerful front and hind claws firmly grasped the lead stallion, leading the group into the sky before releasing the stallion and slamming it onto the grassland. The other juvenile dragons did not possess Karon's strength but left incapacitating wounds on their respective targets. The remaining wild horses scattered, leaving behind those who couldn't move whimpering on the ground. The dragon group landed, Axi also landing in front of her prey, exhaling breath like the red dragon, charred the wild horses' pelts to ash. She then opened their abdomens, discarding the filthy internal organs, consuming the other energy-rich and nutritious viscera. Finally, she signaled Karon to breathe the dragon's breath to char her prey, using his exceptional control of flames to roast the wild horse to perfection with a crisp exterior and tender interior before opening her mouth wide to enjoy the meal. The other juvenile dragons did likewise, with the only difference being that the white dragon liked to freeze the cleaned prey into ice blocks before crunching them noisily, causing the dragon's teeth to ache. Many black dragons enjoyed eating carrion, using their acid to corrode the prey before eating. Rosani claimed that this was the lowly taste of other inferior kin, stating that a real male dragon should be clean and tasteful like the mighty Karon. So every time, either licking his face or asking for the help of green dragon Antagena, or dragging prey and looking at Karon with pleading eyes, Karon couldn't bear it and would help voluntarily. These influences from the unique red dragon were slowly changing the dragon group. Although subtle, these accumulations eventually led to qualitative changes. This is true for anyone or anything. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 14-13, Juvenile Dragon. Chapter 14, Chapter 13, Juvenile Dragon. Compared to the plains, which have now become the focus of the dragon group territory's expansion, the forest is now a leisure resting point for the juvenile dragons. Only when night falls does the dragon group return to their nests in the canyon to sleep, spending most of the time in the nearby forest. Upon discovering that fishing could easily bring inner peace and help suppress the relentless rebellion of the evil dragon blood within him, Karon became Ikaria World's fisherman, sitting resolutely at the fishing spot every day. Even though he ends up getting frustrated due to catching nothing, he considers it a test of willpower. Today's sunshine was just right, making him drowsy. Perhaps the sleeping phase was nearing, as he felt lazy every day and a bit irritable, preferring to eliminate prey with a single dragon breath during hunts. Blue Dragon Das came out from behind a tall tree and walked toward Karon lying by the shore. More stable in character than other juvenile dragons, Blue Dragon, much like the former model Warlock Axie, bore the responsibility of patrolling the resting place among the juvenile dragon group. Karon, I caught this damn guy again. While I wasn't paying attention, it emptied the honey from 3 nearby beehive nests and then hid the honey back in its lair. If I hadn't discovered it soon enough, the remaining hives would have been in danger too. Blue Dragon Das was quite angry, a dangerous small electric light flickering in his light blue eyes. The red dragon opened his eyes and noticed a terrified, trembling black bear lying on the ground behind Blue Dragon Das. Its 2-meter-long body seemed like a helpless lamb beside the massive dragon. The great dragons are particularly possessive, and the juvenile dragons now regard everything in the forest as the private property of the dragon group. Even though these bee nests were left for Karon by Pick Fairy Riven before leaving with her parents to visit elders far away. Technically, the true owner is the Pick Elf, not the dragon group. Riven entrusted the bee group to Karon to prevent her fellow elves from sneaking honey while she was away, not realizing that once things fell into the dragon group's hands, there was no chance of reclaiming them. Learning from Karon how to coat roasted food with thick honey, the juvenile dragons' greed for sweets and delicacies made them pay attention to the bee groups in the forest. Following their cultivated habit, the juvenile dragons restrained their greed by only taking a set amount of honey from the hives, accumulating to meet the consumption of the dragon group. The damn black bear was greedier than the dragon, sweeping the honey accumulated in the hives clean, infuriating Blue Dragon Das. However, the black bear's talent for seeking honeycombs is akin to the red dragon's talent for controlling flames. Hidden in any corner of the forest, hive nests cannot escape the black bear's grasp. Even dragons with excellent sense of smell are not as talented in this area as the black bear. If not for the need for the black bear's talent in finding wild beehives, Das would have torn it apart a long time ago. Karon was also troubled. This black bear was not a fierce beast and lacked the wisdom for communication. Dragons are born capable of learning various languages, including beast language. However, the proud dragons would not learn the meaningless howls of less intelligent creatures. The red dragon sighed, "Forget it, as usual, give it a beating, then confiscate the honey from its lair, but leave some for it." Karon was also quite helpless. This black bear would be caught and severely beaten every time it raided a beehive, yet it never learned its lesson. By the way, Das, have Antagena quickly clear a suitable open space in the forest and transplant the fruit trees we've found into categories there. Let Antagena use her talent in cultivating plants to take good care of them. This will be the orchard for the dragon group's future leisure and can attract bee groups to roost. The ever absent-minded Karon instructed Das. After this sleep phase, as the dragon group's strength grows, perhaps we can start attempting to subdue useful beloveds, allowing them to manage the orchard and graze the bee group for us, providing an endless supply of honey and sweets. Blue Dragon Das lowered his head, responding, "As you wish, wise Karon." The red dragon's period of sleep arrived as expected. The remaining juvenile dragons would soon all enter their sleep phase as well, undergoing the critical transition from juvenile dragon to young dragon, which was extremely vital. In this stage, the juvenile dragons would awaken their own magic, experiencing tremendous growth, but it was also perilous, as the history of the dragon race recorded many examples of dragons gradually perishing during the sleep metamorphosis. The usually lively canyon became desolate, making Axie, accustomed to the bustle, feel a bit out of place, pacing at the canyon's peak daily. After confirming the safety of the juvenile dragons nestled in the dragon nest, he would spread his wings, circling the mountain range again and again, returning to his nest for rest only after nightfall. After night completely fell, the true lazy leader of the dragon group, Carlette, would fly out of her cave, standing on the mountain's highest peak, silently overlooking the sleeping place of the juvenile dragons in the canyon. Until the sun rises. It is the habit of great dragons to protect the fledglings by forming clans, and also the duty of the leader of the dragon group. As the sun rises and the moon sets, the seasons cycle. The sleep of the fledglings will last from 1 to 3 years, which is just a dream for the giant dragons, but a lifetime for many other races. The red dragon sleeps motionless in its ever-expanding cave, breathing slowly. Each breath is accompanied by a massive fluctuation of breath and a surge of magic power, as the magic power begins to be absorbed by the giant dragon to promote its body's evolution. Even the air, which had become stiflingly hot due to the red dragon's long residence, lost its heat, and the cave's temperature seemed to drop in sync with the seasonal changes outside. In the corners of the cave, the lush dragon blood grass, which was born from the blood stains left by the red dragon's gnawing and the influence of its aura over time, is also slowly withering, as the pure fire elemental energy is absorbed by the giant dragon. If a goblin merchant saw this scene, they might pound the ground in tears. The evil dragon's blood is highly toxic to other races, but the dragon blood grass born from the dragon blood contains the purest of such essence. Such a pure dragon blood grass can be used by a mage to create the finest fire attribute magic potion and by a warlock to help purify the dragon blood within their body. In a warrior's hands, it can be used to craft potions that strengthen the body, while a merchant could exchange it for a small pouch of gold coins. This is why giant dragons are considered treasures from head to toe in the outside world, as even the poorest giant dragon's lair will yield some precious materials. Such things are like shining gold coins, but now all has turned into a handful of ashes. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, time passes, and the consciousness of the red dragon also falls into a deep sleep, passively receiving inheritance information. With the loss of conscious suppression, the evil dragon blood within the red dragon begins to boil, absorbing a vast amount of fire attribute magic power, which then transforms into surging flames that blaze within its bloodline. The unyielding evil dragon blood burns and withers in the flames, only to absorb the giant dragon's energy and magic power to revive again, day after day. The red dragon's bright scales lost their luster as time passed, and the flame-like patterns entwined around its body dried up and blackened, like dried riverbeds. The giant dragon's strong body began to wither away, with longer intervals between heartbeats, and its overwhelming aura slowly diminished, almost to nothing, like a lifeless dragon-shaped rock. Dust began to cover the red dragon's body, and the once abandoned cave welcomed new occupants, with cobwebs in corners and fist-sized venomous spiders settling in. Stubborn life broke out from the consolidated ground, wild grass sprouting. Some insects found this seemingly safe haven, and occasionally, a burrowing lizard would hang on the webs. After more than a year, 2 white dragons were the first to wake from their slumber. After a brief period of hunting and feeding, the 2 white dragons, whose bodies had grown, found themselves bored and decided not to dominate the water hole, instead digging a hole in the mountain wall to pass the time. In the following months, the green dragon and the black dragon also completed their slumber, becoming juvenile dragons and awakening their dragon life magic. However, perhaps due to sleeping for too long becoming a habit, these juvenile dragons preferred to stay in their nests. Even Black Dragon Rosani no longer coveted the gorgeous waterhole, and the daily episodes played in the past vanished. Then, Blue Dragon Das also awoke, losing his former enthusiasm for patrolling the forest, except when joining other juvenile dragons for hunting. The last to wake was the hot-tempered, stubborn young female dragon Kleena, who had now entered a new developmental phase and had become the strongest among the awakened juvenile dragons. She aimed to lead the hunting party of the dragon group while Karon was in slumber, but Blue Dragon Das disagreed, even saying Kleena was a fool with her head wedged between her buttocks. Although Kleena was slightly larger in size than Das, the pure-blood Blue Dragon did not fear her. Blue dragons are firmly ranked second among the 5-color dragons, always vying with red dragons for the title of the strongest dragon species among the 5-color dragons, thus showcasing the powerful blue dragon bloodline. Meanwhile, black dragon Rosani and white dragon Gomot neither opposed nor supported, but stayed a bit closer to blue dragon, as Kleena was usually quite arrogant, displaying the kind of arrogance of a red dragon looking down on other colorful dragons. Green jade dragon Antagena, despite having a good relationship with Kleena, didn't openly express any support for the red dragon. When differences arose within the dragon group, she would use beguiling language to diverge the topic. As for the other rather clumsy white dragon Kamid, although he hadn't learned foul language like his brother by Karen's side, he had learned something else. When facing a dragon he didn't want to deal with, he would look at them earnestly and go "Aba aba." Thus, the juvenile dragons were in dispute, losing cohesion, starting to hunt individually, and like other giant dragons, spent their days lazily and dispersed in their caves sleeping. Though Axi would occasionally fly over this cliff during territorial patrols, never again did he pause. This place was no different from any other groups of giant dragons. Naturally, he became just like the others. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 15-14, Awakening. Chapter 15, Chapter 14, Awakening. In the third year of Karen's slumber, the red dragon, turned to ashen rock, finally showed a reaction. Under the continuous scorching refinement of the magic flames, a more powerful ancestral bloodline emerged from the mediocre evil dragon blood. The magic flames were devoured by the awakened strand of crimson blood. The dull evil dragon blood coursing through the red dragon's body was rapidly devoured like faded paint by the newly birthed bloodline. The red dragon's heartbeat paused for several breaths, then the newborn blood erupted from the depths of its veins, rushing through the dragon's body after being pumped by its heart. The long accumulated dense magic power outside the body was also stirred, forming a small-scale magical storm in the cave. The breath of the red dragon began from nothing, slowly growing stronger. It was accumulating strength and slowly awakening. The increasingly powerful ancestral bloodline was nourishing the giant dragon's body, transforming its form. The dragon's current body had become thin like a skeleton covered in scale armor. Its body length had grown by half a meter, yet it appeared more massive than before it fell asleep. Its neck, in comparison to other red dragons, had shortened a bit, but appeared more robust. A layer of bone protection grew on its broad lower jaw. On the skin covering this layer, the originally slender spines became short and thick. On the head, delineated like a rock carving, grew long and thick dragon horns. The patterns that once spiraled like fire lines around them now transformed into a design interwoven with dark red, earth yellow, and golden hues. The seemingly unbreakable, metal-hard dragon horns split into 3 branches, each pair of dragon horns forming 6 branches that rose backward and upward from the head resting flat on the ground, showcasing unparalleled strength and sharpness. The base of the dragon horns was actually hollow, indicating that the giant dragon could now channel magic through them to cast spells. The scales on the dragon's body shed quietly. New scales grew wider and thicker, with the deep red adorned with a golden luster. Even as a pretended half-blood golden dragon, many dragons would likely believe it. Changes were happening to Karon in the cave, and changes were happening outside as well. Sensing the awakening of the juvenile dragon leader, the blue dragon emerged from the cave. He called on the sneaky white dragon Gomot and his brother Kamid, who had the demeanor of an actor, and the 3 dragons ventured into the forest with large stone jars used to store honey. The anxious blue dragon flapped its wings hurriedly, beginning to worry if that damned black bear had ruined all the nearby beehives. Antagena suddenly remembered the task Karon had given her to manage the orchard, so she took the eager black dragon Rosani away as labor. Black dragons were good at digging, and surely clearing weeds would be competent too. Kleena suddenly found herself seemingly isolated by the dragon group, but possessing a brain more developed than humans did not mean having more wisdom than humans. A proud red dragon didn't have the concept of reflection. So she could only pace back and forth every day at Karen's dragon nest, Even though she had been headlocked before, she knew clearly that as soon as Karon woke up, the dragon group would welcome her back. The air in the cave changed from hot to extremely hot, with the steam from magma and the smell of sulfur filling the entire cave. Karon's awakening power caused subtle cracks to appear on the once smooth cave walls, from which a faint scent of the fire elemental plane attached to the Icaria world could be smelled. The flat ground bulged with raised patterns, within the protruding soil were some dull metallic ores. As the red dragon lay on the uneven ground, a wave similar to dragon power began to rise on its body, but unlike dragon power, this force was invisible yet tangible. This power spread rapidly as soon as it was born. Unimaginable high temperatures enveloped the area in a domain-like manner, spreading in all directions, inescapable. The ground littered with dried insect and animal corpses instantly turned to ashes, even the metallic ores beneath the dragon's feet melted into black-red molten iron from the intense heat. Even within the cave, the magical power reacted violently as if scorched by fierce flames. This power burned all, setting everything ablaze. Fortunately, without Karon's intentional stimulation, this domain only maintained the bare minimum of power. This was the power brought by the newborn blood to the giant dragon, similar to an aura, yet more powerful. This was the domain all things turned to ash, a talent ability awakened during the transition from a juvenile dragon to a young dragon. After 3 years, the slumbering Karon finally opened his eyes, emanating dragon power to announce his awakening, feeling the exceptionally formidable power within his body, and the magic awakened by his growth into a young dragon. He felt he could defeat several of his pre-slumber selves. Perhaps after another rapid growth following slumber, he could compete with the young dragon Axie. Before he could feel proud, Karon noticed that the cave walls were starting to melt into stone water due to his own power, which startled him into hastily retracting his dragon power. With the proficient control gained from dragon power, the strength of the Ashen domain was also easily restrained. Then he bolted out of his nest, avoiding becoming the first fool in dragon race history to be crushed to death by the collapse of his own cave, only to be ridiculed as a disgrace by other dragons for countless generations. Kleena, sensing the commotion, was peering into the cave from the entrance, only to be knocked flying by the suddenly emerging red dragon, unexpectedly tasting the long-lost flavor of a red dragon bulldozer. Having grown to nearly 5 meters after recent development post-slumber, Kleena under the force of the male red dragon was like a youth encountering a burly man, flailing her limbs and flipping several somersaults before crashing to the ground with a thud. Kleena shook her head, and at that moment she seemed to see stars all over the sky. Roar! The red dragon's order was executed perfectly. The juvenile dragon formation attacking in a triangle swiftly spread out circularly using Karon as the pivot, encircling the herd of bison who began to flee frantically upon sensing danger. The rapidly descending dragon group snapped their wide wings open again about 10 meters above the ground, their slightly slowed torsos crashing straight into the rushing bison. Pairs of sharp claws penetrated the prey's flesh, and the bison's dying wails along with the dragon group's enthusiastic roars of slaughter became the main melody of the grassland beneath. Karon did not know what had happened to the juvenile dragons during his slumber, but upon awakening, the first thing he did out of habit was to summon the dragon group, make them hunt for him, lead them, influence them, and make them get used to him again. He also wanted to take this opportunity to see if any juvenile dragon was swelling with power and would challenge him during his weak phase. So far, the most thick-headed one most likely to challenge him, Kleena, seemed greatly shocked now after almost getting knocked silly by him, while the other juvenile dragons exhibited submissiveness and welcome. Karon originally intended to try the Dragon King returns after 3 years away trope to give these juvenile dragons a little shock, but unfortunately, reality did not meet the dragon's wishes. The red dragon regretfully shook his head while eating heartily, the long-awaited food flowing down his throat and intestines into his shrunken, empty stomach, then crushed by the mighty stomach of the giant dragon, swiftly broken down by the all-corrosive stomach acid. The rapidly digested food was transformed into the energy needed for life to supply the giant dragon, and the dragon's emaciated body gradually filled out. The food piled beside Karon by the juvenile dragons was diminishing, and the red dragon's strong muscles became robust again, the streamlined and knotted muscles making the frail black dragon Rosani deeply envious. As the red dragon's body expanded, a dignity and power far surpassing the past emerged upon him, as if the giant dragon before them represented strength, the embodiment of violence. No artist in the world could carve out the coexistence of majesty and ferocity on the red dragon's head. The thick and forked dragon horns had a unique ferocity and beauty. His mouth full of long fangs and broad jaw made it unimaginable how tremendous the biting force of the dragon before them could be, easily crushing even the toughest thigh bones of bison. The scales covering his entirely strong, mighty body shimmered with a dazzling luster that even dragons marveled at, surpassing the beauty renowned amongst golden dragons and silver dragons. It was akin to glowing treasures. All of this fascinated green dragon Antagena, who, dazedly, approached to touch Karon's scales. In the blink of an eye, Kleena, who was in a state of shock, snapped to clarity, a look of warning and threat emerging in her eyes, blocking the engrossed Karon with a low, warning growl emanating from her throat. Kamid quietly nudged his brother Gomot with a claw, whispering, "That pretty little female dragon seems to have taken a liking to Karon. You're out of luck, Gomot." Though dragons only reach sexual maturity during adolescence, juvenile dragons are not clueless children and have already begun to gain awareness and knowledge in this area. Gomot glanced at that little female dragon, akin to a green jade, with her small nose horn and elegant lines, and said dejectedly, "Forget it, Antagena is definitely going to lay a clutch of eggs with Karon, maybe 2 clutches, and I'll be waiting for ages until Karon doesn't want to lay eggs with Antagena anymore. Then there's Blue Dragon Das, I've got a long queue. Actually, I have no interest in Antagena, I rather fancy Kleena, she's destined to be a mighty female dragon." Das came over upon hearing the conversation, his tastes leaning more towards strength rather than appearance, although Kleena's appearance also marks her as a small beauty among dragon aesthetics. At the mention of this topic, Black Dragon Rosani, being a male giant dragon, expressed his opinion, squeezing in with a smile, "Hee, actually I find those agile and beautiful little mares amongst the wild horses to be quite nice too." A few juvenile dragons chuckled. Everyone knew dragons possess the world's broadest domain of aesthetics, but at times, it is one of those nauseating and offensive dragon aesthetics. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlov.com. Chapter 16-15, Kamid in Deep Thought. Chapter 16, Chapter 15, Kamid in Deep Thought. Karon, how did you grow such a big head? I think your body is much larger than Kleena, who is also a red dragon, completely inconsistent with the normal age stages. Blue Dragon Das curiously asked Karon, who seemed to be meditating with his eyes closed. In theory, every giant dragon treats its inheritance and secrets as treasures, not to be pried into. But the juvenile dragons have now become accustomed to communication and sharing, so Das asked this question with an experimental mindset. Karon's red body was already more than 7 meters long, and at this moment, he was lying under an apple tree with pink and white blossoms, exploring the secrets in his mind. He always felt that as he interacted with these juvenile dragons, he gradually established a mysterious, one-way connection that only he could perceive, but this connection was elusive, and he couldn't grasp its pattern. Upon hearing the inquiry from the blue dragon, he finally opened his eyes. Just as he was pondering how to answer, he noticed that several juvenile dragons around him had perked their ears and quietly approached, obviously very curious about this question as well. Thanks to Green Dragon Antagena's meticulous care, the orchard belonging to the dragon group was thriving. With summer approaching, some trees had already started to bloom. This was the juvenile dragon's first industry, so they were quite concerned and came to inspect. Moreover, because the juvenile dragons were always in a group, their movements were usually closely connected, unlike those dragons who were expelled from the dragon nest by their parents to live alone. Apart from their innately stubborn nature, the influence of their environment was crucial. Therefore, the juvenile dragons in this family mostly enjoyed group activities like human children. Karon pondered for a while, thinking that although his uniqueness was partly unreplicable, it might also be partly replicable. So he organized his thoughts and decided to share with the juvenile dragons. Well, I've awakened the bloodline of the previous generation of red dragons. The resurgence of my ancestors' bloodline gives me a higher limit and potential than other giant dragons. Karon revealed a part of the truth that could be replicated to these juvenile dragons. In his eyes, he would be delighted if the juvenile dragons could become stronger because of this. Growing up together, these juvenile dragons would be his right-hand helpers in anything he pursued, as long as he could lead them. The awakening of the previous generation's bloodline? The juvenile dragons were not unfamiliar with this concept, as they all hailed from pure-blooded dragon lineages, with this knowledge enclosed in their inheritance. There are many ways giant dragons could gain strength, with the most ancient and authentic being the tracing of one's bloodline origins. Reviving those particularly potent ancestral bloodlines from one's parents, and beyond that, there was the more ancient ancestral dragon blood and the blood of the first generation from when the dragon race was first born. Throughout the history of the five-colored giant dragons, there were many cases of dragons awakening the blood of ancestral return, but they had gradually become historical legends, with no specific information about pursuing this powerful path. Moreover, in the inheritance of dragons, only the five-colored evil dragon goddess Tiamat was said to possess such extraordinary power, capable of bestowing great bloodlines to the dragons she favored. Kleena had always seen the male red dragon as her goal to catch up with after being repeatedly defeated by Karon. Upon hearing the red dragon's explanation, she urgently asked, "Then how does one awaken a more powerful ancestral bloodline in oneself, Karon? I haven't noticed you doing anything particularly unusual in your training, unless fishing is also a useful method." Mentioning this made Kleena a little frustrated. She had been staying by Karon's side for a while, and it seemed unreasonable that such a simple act could be so beneficial to a giant dragon. Green Dragon Antagena and Blue Dragon Das both showed skeptical looks, while only White Dragon Kamid had a contemplative expression in his eyes. Karon shook his head, clenching his dragon claw into a fist and resting it under his chin, a position that made him feel more comfortable. He combined the information from his inheritance and then concluded, "It should be combat. Haven't you noticed that those dragons who have clearly awakened the blood of ancestral return throughout history aren't like the majority of dragons who hide in treasure-laden caves, occasionally emerging to exert their dominance? Those dragons enjoy challenging powerful opponents. They find joy in battles, which allows the evil dragon blood within them to find satisfaction. Perhaps this is why the evil dragon blood evolves." Rosani scratched his head in confusion, "But we always hunt together. Karon, do you sneak out after we fall asleep to fight others?" At this moment, the black dragon's expression was indescribable, akin to a university student discovering that roommates were secretly studying and taking extra classes. "Of course not. Besides fighting enemies for satisfaction, you can also battle yourself, struggling against the will of the evil dragon blood within, to gain mastery over it rather than letting it dominate your will." Karon always felt that this method was somewhat akin to so-called refining heart, an exercise in mental and willpower training. Even though Karon knew that his awakening of ancestral bloodline stemmed from a combination of factors, there was no doubt that this training method was a significant incentive. "That's too difficult, Karon, how can you possibly manage it?" Green Dragon Antagena sighed. "Controlling the evil dragon blood first requires a will strong enough to suppress the inherent urges that dragon blood imparts to the giant dragons. Just like the intrinsic nature of red dragons, being quick-tempered, impulsive, and aggressive. Yet, after persevering for a long time, Karon had become more rational and composed than the innately steady blue dragon, extending his claws only when necessary. This indicates that daily, Karon resisted and succeeded against the influence of the evil dragon blood. The influence of the giant dragon blood is extremely difficult to overcome. For Karon, the simplest part, which was the hardest for these juvenile dragons, was that many dragons couldn't differentiate between their own will and thoughts induced by the evil dragon blood. Therefore, this method sounded to these juvenile dragons like a frustrating exercise of doing the opposite of what one wants to do. Kleena held her head in her hands, walking away, muttering to herself, "Why can Karon do it, and I can't? I need to see if I can do it myself." The other juvenile dragons pondered over Karon's words, since no creature would refuse to become stronger. Blue Dragon Das, who always liked thinking more than the others, vaguely grasped some ideas. Gomot and Rosani mimicked Karon by resting their dragon claws under their chins, perhaps hoping that this method of thinking could bring additional wisdom. Kamid was still in a pensive state. Whenever he encountered something he couldn't understand, he always looked like this. The diverse flowers in the orchard swayed in the breeze, their colors as varied as the cluttered thoughts in the juvenile dragons' heads at this moment. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 17-16, Anna on the Prairie. Chapter 17, Chapter 16, Anna on the Prairie. Today is a sunny day, and the temperature of the grassland remains warm under the gentle afternoon sunshine, prompting many animals living on the grassland to become active. Nourished by abundant rain, the grassland hosts numerous rivers, and the low-lying areas of the grassland have formed several depressions. At this moment, many fat hippos emerge from the riverbed, waddling into this water park for some frolicking. Many animals coming to drink water are not afraid of these seemingly massive hippos, standing beside them calmly and drinking at ease. They need to seize the time to replenish water because hippos are indeed like manure-producing machines, and this rare, safe, and clean water source will soon become murky from the many hippos, making it hazardous to drink. The silhouettes of the juvenile dragons were cast on the earth by the sunlight, and the shadows of the assembled dragon group covered a substantial area of the grassland. The shadow quickly swept over the animals that were drinking with their heads down, for the dragon group does not hunt near water sources. The juvenile dragons pursued their prey and soon dove down accompanied by Karon. White Dragon Gomot, however, landed at the back of the dragon group, being the most timid among the juvenile dragons, always preferring to hide at the back, even when facing prey that cannot resist. Now it has become easy for the juvenile dragons to hunt for food. As an undeniable overlord of the grassland, the pack of juvenile dragons, especially under the leadership of the mighty Red Dragon, easily becomes more aggressive. Soon, several white-headed buffaloes were captured by the giant dragon, but the juvenile dragons did not stop to feast at the scene. Instead, they carried their prey to a place not far from the Dragon Nest mountain range before landing again. This place is where the dragon group feeds, not because these juvenile dragons have any peculiar rituals. It's special somewhat for the dragon group, or more precisely for Karon. Their feeding here is simply to imprint the scent belonging to the giant dragon more in this place. Craving a change of flavor, White Dragon Gomot took the initiative to help Karon with skinning and removing the viscera from his prey in exchange for the aid of Red Dragon's dragon fire. Red Dragon, controlling the usually violent dragon fire, let it become gentle, which undoubtedly also helped exercise the Red Dragon's ability to control flames. The fiery and softened flames licked and roasted the buffalo slowly into a fragrance, leaving only a hind leg with a big chunk of thigh meat untouched by the flame, remaining raw fleshy. But Gomot was not surprised because all the juvenile dragons knew Karon would again use the collected fee to feed his little pet. Karon carried the buffalo's hind leg, still marked with crimson veins, in his mouth, walking to a place not far from where the juvenile dragons were feeding. There's a solitary green banyan tree growing on the grassland, with thick foliage that can well shield against the sometimes excessively scorching sun on the grassland. Usually, such a place would belong to powerful beast groups or might be exclusive to some ferocious animals. Contrary to this, the occupant of this place is only a female leopard, which, among ordinary beasts, isn't even all that strong. This female leopard is obviously aged, appearing somewhat decrepit now. The female leopard lying under the tree, with drooping jowls, looks like a toothless old cat, and its eyes, once bright, have begun to grow a bit cloudy. Yet seeing Karon walk over, this female leopard surprisingly did not run away. Instead, she moved her now less agile body slowly toward Karon, rubbing against the red dragon's forelimbs, and then lay down, exposing her pale belly in a display of submission and compliance. Karon gently placed the buffalo leg he was holding onto the ground, signaling to the female leopard that she could feast freely. The female leopard scrambled up in one motion, and with a purring sound, began to enjoy her meal. Anna, that's the name Karon gave this female leopard, and it was under Karon's watchful gaze that Anna grew up. The red dragon always had a fondness for such majestic furred big cats, and upon discovering such a creature in his territory, he began watching over it. Anna's family seems to vary from ordinary beasts, starting from Anna's mother. The family of leopards appears to possess emotions far richer than those of ordinary beasts. Generally speaking, after raising young cubs, the mother leopard would chase away her offspring from her territory, which is also true for those solitary giant dragons. But after raising Anna, her mother left by herself, leaving this safe domain to her offspring. Maybe Anna was too lazy, and her mother no longer wanted to bear the burden of Anna's freeloading, nor was she willing to drive Anna away. And because of laziness, Anna, who spent whole days just napping, didn't even learn the skills necessary for hunting, forcing Anna, who lived as a lone leopard, to start learning hunting techniques on her own. But many times, she'd still go hungry, having to scavenge what was left over by other animals. It seemed like watching Anna's life documentary for Karon, seeing the leopard Anna develop from clumsily hunting on her own to later mastering her acute hunting skills. Then, later, Anna started freeloading again. Or more accurately, mooching off her husband. Anna met a male leopard, returning to her lazy ways, knowing only to sleep all day long. But perhaps influenced by Anna, this male leopard also behaved unusually, inspired by the inner beast. He would attack and punish the beasts that dared to offend the female leopard, for Anna, allowed Anna to feed alongside him, and bore offspring with her. Because this male leopard was reliable, Karon named him Reliable. Unfortunately, Reliable died. It was only after Reliable's death that Anna took up the responsibility of raising the cubs, but after rearing 2 cubs to adulthood, she started freeloading off her offspring. When her 2 leopard offspring reached their peak, they too grew tired of their lazy mother leopard, but they didn't banish the now weakened Anna, choosing to leave this territory, just like their grandmother did, leaving Anna to live on like this till now. The female leopard never feared Karon, as in her daily life, she frequently encountered this friendly giant figure. Karon watched as Anna slowly ate. For Karon, what was merely a transitional period from hatchling to juvenile was, for this leopard, most of a lifetime. No longer strong, the leopard's claws and teeth were no longer sharp, and capturing prey was difficult, so Karon now delivered a portion of the hunt to her every day. At that moment, 2 young leopards sleeping under the tree awoke and happily ran over, playing with abandon under Karon's feet. These were Anna and another male leopard's offspring, once carried by Anna and presented to Karon. Perhaps Anna realized Karon's companionship and solitude. Approaching death, the female leopard chose to bear one last litter and sent them to Karon. Karon refused. The red dragon gazed at the slowly setting sun on the horizon, pondering how he and the dragon group shall rule this land for a long time, and equally long will he keep watching over Anna's family. Black Dragon Rosani looked at the red dragon draped in the dusk and, somewhat bewilderedly, asked, "Why does Karon love such beasts, weak and short-lived?" Perhaps because these beasts possess complex and abundant emotions regarding family and blood relatives similar to humans, Blue Dragon Das replied with a wise demeanor, though he felt the use of family and relations for beasts anthropomorphic, but regarding Anna, it felt appropriate. These juvenile dragons also frequently followed Karon to watch the documentary, among which several male dragons were even summoned by Karon to urinate under that big tree. Why does Karon favor these beasts with emotions? Rosani seemed at times inclined to get into a mental rut, resembling more closely the psychology of beasts than most giant dragons. Well, that's because Karon possesses complex and abundant emotions himself, you idiot. The red dragon Kleena retorted impatiently, raising her dragon claw intending to knock some sense into Rosani's foolish head if he asked again. Rosani shrank his head in bewilderment, muttering to himself, "Emotions. Source: webnovel.com, updated by novlove.com. Chapter 18-17, Gold-Eating Beast. Chapter 18, Chapter 17, Gold-Eating Beast. Flying southward from here, it takes a juvenile dragon 13 or 14 days of full flight to cross this forest. Beyond the forest lies endless mountains and hills. Even a giant dragon needs to fly continuously for at least half a month to traverse these mountains. That place is favored by divine beings and is also the land of divine promise for humans. Though the land is not as broad and flat as a prairie, the land between the mountains and hills holds far more fertility, thus nurturing many races. Carlette squatted on the platform at the highest peak of this mountain range, explaining to Karon what she knew from her knowledge and experiences. Karon did not receive knowledge about the transformation skill during his sleep, so now every few days, after Carlette is well rested, he seeks her guidance on the skill. After learning the knowledge and application techniques of the transformation skill, he also requests Carlette to explain some knowledge about the world, for the world is constantly changing, and the legacy in his mind isn't fully omniscient. In consideration of the rare ores Red Dragon excavated using his elemental control master talent, Carlette reluctantly agreed to Red Dragon's request. But Carlette now no longer allows Red Dragon to enter her cave, because she has begun to feel a bit of threat from Red Dragon. It's hard to believe, but a young blue dragon would actually sense a threat from a juvenile dragon. Though not much, it is genuinely present. Carlette chooses to trust her instincts. As Karon sits beside Carlette, he's no longer that tiny fellow who could be knocked over by a puff of air. The talent of this red dragon might unexpectedly make him the most powerful giant dragon of this dragon group family. With Carlette's current mild relationship with Red Dragon, the Blue Dragon leader holds expectations that the dragon group she established will keep growing stronger, so as to avoid being scattered across the world like her birthplace, the Blue Dragon clan. Thinking of this, Carlette tilted her head to Karon, emphasizing, "Little Karon, if you ever need to traverse that mountain range to reach human habitation, you can secretly pass through the route I came from. Do not fly directly over the mountains, for there are many hidden monsters in those mountains that even giant dragons cannot match." "I will be especially careful," Karon nodded, then curiously asked, "What kind of monsters are there, to make dragons so cautious?" "Actually, I don't know much. Though my birthplace, the Blue Dragon clan, is just at the edge of the southern mountains, no giant dragons dare to easily cross the territorial boundaries to deeply explore the mountains, even though the Blue Dragon clan has 3 adult giant dragons." Fear flashed in Carlette's eyes, but one day, for some unknown reason, a mature thorn-tailed mountain cat appeared within the Blue Dragon clan's territory. Maybe it had wandered from deep within the mountains, or traversed from a lower plane. This thorntail effortlessly killed the Blue Dragon leader, then began hunting the remaining great dragons. "I was lucky, scattered to escape with the giant dragons of the family, and I succeeded." Karon knew of these creatures supernaturally spawned super hunters, resembling giant black 3-headed mountain cats. These creatures naturally become legendary creatures upon maturity. Though they cannot use magic, they are stronger and more perfect than giant dragons. This creature possesses silent mobility, is skilled in hiding and lurking, and its unmatched agility always places it in the offensive forefront. Its strengths are numerous. It can be said to be an all-around enhanced version of giant dragons besides flying and magic. The bodies dragons pride on are as fragile as paper before these creatures. The toxic prick at the end of a thorn-tailed mountain cat's tail can easily bring down a giant dragon. If the legacy in a dragon's mind were a piece of paper, the thorn-tailed mountain cat as a species is marked with a thick red pen, highlighted in bold as high risk. The nearest to the west of the Blue Dragon clan's territory is a nest of hill giants. It's said many giants with dormant bloodlines are scattered throughout this mountain range, with storm giants near the sea to the east of the mountains, and powerful one-eyed giant lords deep within the mountains. Moreover, Supreme Celestial Titan, a legendary celestial creature, is rumored to drift here, slumbering somewhere. Carlette roughly shared what she knew. Hiss, Karon took a deep breath, his recently inflated heart calming down quietly. No wonder Carlette seems disinterested in expanding the dragon group territory, always sleeping in her cave, she must have been scared off. Now, she probably just wants to gather strength cautiously. Karon also started to ponder whether his decision to journey to human lands to learn magic was too hasty. Maybe he needs to patiently wait until trader ships appear in the gulf where the ogre tribe resides before making a decision. Creak, creak, Karon lay on a low mound on the prairie. He tossed a refined metal chunk into his mouth, the sharp, long tusks crushing the metal chunk. The tough metal under the dragon's fearsome tusks felt like a delicious chocolate. Red Dragon's agile tongue licked the roof of his mouth. The iron-rich flavor was slightly bitter, akin to pure dark chocolate. From the pile of metal chunks before him, he picked out metals he wanted to taste. Those high in silver content had a cooling flavor, like mint-flavored chocolate. Metals high in gold content had a particularly soft and smooth texture. Consuming metal can promote the development of a dragon's skin and scales, making the skin tougher and the scales firmer. However, this requires prolonged and substantial consumption. This amount is merely a drop in the bucket for Red Dragon, Karon's just tasting them out of greed. Karon's mastery of metal and earth elemental talents allows him to perceive many things on the prairie that other giant dragons find hard to discover. He just sensed while patrolling in the sky that many places in this grassland beneath him contained many minerals, with many black minerals covering the surface thickly, and some buried underground. The places he sensed, if connected, evidently form a large open-pit mining area, and with the current perception of the Red Dragon, it's difficult to probe the size of this mining area underground. The surface and underground of this mining area have a thick layer of black minerals, but Karon also discovered traces of silver and copper ores in them. A closer inspection also revealed traces of lead and zinc ores, making this a treasure land. Moreover, there's a high probability that a gold mine lies buried under the earth, which can be identified from the associated minerals of the deposit. In his excitement, Karon was thinking about whether to reluctantly accept those bear goblins and green-skinned rats in the forest as miners. Just at this moment, the soil beneath the grass-covered ground near a mound in the distance began to move. A yellow shadow, wrapped in a gust of wind, darted out of the grass, brushing aside the wild grass to reveal a dark hole. The yellow shadow was extremely fast, but the Red Dragon's keen eyesight could still clearly capture all its movements. This creature was about the size of a dog, its entire body covered in rough golden fur, with silver eyes and gold pupils in the center. The ends of its 8 strong legs bore 6 centimeter long copper claws. This was a gold-eating beast, a creature that likes to live in regions with rich reserves of golden ore veins, and uses gold as a supplementary food. The appearance of the gold-eating beast confirmed Karon's suspicion, but perhaps due to the particularly strong newborn blood, the greed from the bottom of his heart instantly occupied the Red Dragon's mind. This damn thing dared to steal my gold mine. Spreading its 13-meter-wide broad wings, casting a shadow, the great dragon roared up and lunged at the gold-eating beast. The gold-eating beast running ahead felt the aura of the great dragon, terrified to the core. Having just escaped from the attack of those wicked kobolds underground, it found itself inexplicably under the assault of a great dragon. With low intelligence, the gold-eating beast did not explore the reasons, it just moved its 8 legs even faster. But it hadn't run far when what was once a normal grassland suddenly became strange. The flat plain under its 8 long legs suddenly sank, and a dirt pit appeared out of nowhere, causing the unsuspecting gold-eating beast to fall right in. With its powerful 8 legs, it tried to step on the bottom of the pit to jump out, only to find itself unable to exert force. Each time it tried to push off, the soil beneath gave way, causing its 8 legs to flounder in the muddy pit. Karon landed on the ground and extended his head to stare at the gold-eating beast that played dead in the pit upon his arrival. The creature's fur was very valuable, the completely stripped fur could be made into an extremely strong and beautiful leather coat by merchants. This leather coat not only offers strong physical defense but can also resist ordinary flames and to some extent, magical flames, thus it is very valuable, estimated to be worth about 15,000 to 20,000 gold coins. The body of the gold-eating beast can also be smelted. A creature of this size with incredibly dense body tissues can yield roughly 150 to 200 pounds of high-purity gold after smelting. It can be said that this creature is made of gold coins, and this is basic knowledge inherited in the mind of the red dragon along with an instinctive appraisal intuition. A living gold-eating beast is of even higher value. If tamed, it could be used to sniff out ore veins and further tap into its abilities. However, the gold-eating beast's intelligence is equivalent to that of a low-intelligence beast, unable to communicate, and Karon didn't know how to tame a gold-eating beast, so he was hesitating. From the entrance of the burrow the gold-eating beast emerged from, two heads quietly poked out. Beneath crocodile-like heads were lizard-like bodies, and in their lizard-like claws were bone-like magical artifacts, clearly indicating their identity as kobold sorcerers. The two kobold sorcerers were whispering, "What should we do? That gold-eating beast was caught by a true dragon, and it's a fierce and greedy red dragon. If we go out to bargain, we might be burned to death. There's no way we can get that beast back." The slightly larger kobold sorcerer shook his head and scolded, "You're truly an idiot. We just need to align ourselves with this powerful true dragon, serve him, and then request the great true dragon to grant us that beast so we can better serve him. Wouldn't that easily bring the beast back to us?" "You're so smart," the smaller kobold beamed, "then why don't we simply align ourselves with that seemingly stronger blue dragon from before? It should be close to a juvenile dragon." "You're such an idiot," the other kobold glared at his companion. "That blue dragon is too ugly.